green. And we're off. Okay, we're good. Okay, I don't have a gavel. I'll just make that kind of noise. So welcome everybody on a warm evening in July. Thank you for coming out. This is our July meeting, the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee. I'm the chair, John Davey, Vice Chair John Reslier, Vice Chair Brooke Washburn is virtual with us tonight, and Vice Chair Tim White. So we have a pretty focused meeting tonight. We had talked with transportation several, at least in May was the last where we said we're doing this, but we also have the benefit that Director Gardner's here tonight as well. So we're going to get underway, and let's see. It's hard to talk and drive at the same time, and it sounds like my volume's on here. So let me turn that off. Here we go. So let me get into. Sorry guys. Okay, there we go. So that'll be on this week. Okay, so we're going. So we're calling the meeting to order. I mentioned our officers are here, one virtual. We begin with the adoption of our meeting agenda. Is there anything officers want to change on the agenda? No? Okay, we're good. Moving forward, the very first thing we do is have an opportunity for public comment for matters that are not on our agenda tonight. If it's something that's on our agenda, we'll ask you to wait till we get to that part. And we'll hit the room first, then we'll go to Zoom. But we will say that if you're in the room, these microphones aren't for the room. These microphones are for the audience on Zoom and for our meeting recording that we use for our minutes. So if you want to provide some comments, go ahead and grab a microphone. When you push it, it turns green. Talk. That's pretty complicated. But if you keep it in front of you, then the Zoom attendees and our recording will hear what you have to say. So are there any public comments in the room? I think you got one right there, Steve. Yeah, they don't slide too
well. Thank you for the opportunity here. This is directed towards Ms. Gardner and John Heidel, our Supervisor District 1. My question is right now there's several HOAs that are maintaining private trail systems that are open to the public, and it was compelled by the county for conditions of approval. But these HOAs have to maintain these trails to include any civil liability that happens. So if Johnny trips and hurts himself, that HOA is liable for that accident, and so the insurance goes in there. So my question is, under what authority does the county compel a private property owner to have to open up their property for a public trail for recreational purposes and assume all civil liability that occurs on that trail?
I can't quote you a law that stipulates that, but I do know in previous agreements that have been made, development agreements, whatever, there's a general trend of trying to get ownership of the responsibility for all kinds of open space, whether it be, trails are not necessarily open space, but the same kind of thing applies with open space where you have wooded ravines, to be the responsibility of the homeowners association or some other entity that is expected to be long existing in terms of its ability to maintain and to fund those kind of provisions. So generally it's associated with an HOA, but not always. But I can't give you off the top of my head what it is in state law that empowers the county to do that, but they're generally set as conditions at the time that they're approved, and that usually comes from the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. And so that's kind of the summary I could give you. Karen could probably give you more of the details, but it's happened over many, many decades. It's not something new. So.
No, what I'm keen concerned about is that in the condition of approval, it says either HOA or CSD take it. CSD refuses, because some of these trails are within the lighting and landscape district. So the homeowner taxpayer is already paying taxes on that area within their assessment district, but yet they're compelled to have to take the trail. And those deals are cut right before there's even homeowners. It's the developer and CSD. But my question is, and Ms. Garner too, if you can, and I don't expect you to answer anything, but the fact is how can you compel a private property owner to have to open up their property for general purpose use for recreational service and then have them assume the civil liability? So if somebody hurts themselves, that promontory, Blackstone or Serrano, that HOA is going to have to assume that liability. I can't, that doesn't make sense to me. So if you can provide any type of documentation, because a condition approval does not support that, because this is something that is different, because you're talking about a liability. But anyway, I appreciate that. And I know that's probably a follow-up question for you guys. Thank you.
I would like to answer part of that question for you. when the properties are developed like Heritage at Four Seasons, the plan included something that would be given back to the community, which would be bike trails and pedestrian trails. In the case of Heritage, all of their trails are basically outside of their community, outside of their gates. Okay, you cannot get into their bike trails or their pedestrian trails. They're outside their gate. So in other words, when it started, when it was planned, it was given, I guess, as a community resource. And who pays for it after that? You know, it's like when they started Four Seasons, they wanted 2 trees on every, in front of everybody's house. They didn't realize how big these darn things were going to grow and how much problem they were going to cause. So I hope that answers a little bit for you.
I think so. I think John has always been responsive, and I think Karen has been a great help too. So I have no worries that they'll look into it. But thank you.
Okay, are there any other public comments in the room for things that aren't on our agenda?
Yes.
Give a mic. Oh,
Got one. Oh, no,
here's one.
I have a mic, thank you.
Fight over it.
Okay, no arm wrestling, but yeah, if you want to go and
I'm
then,
just curious if we're gonna talk about EDH 52, the status of EDH 52 tonight, or is that the last item on the?
it is the last item, and I can tell you now, we're still waiting. I mean, I don't want to make it sit for the whole meeting, but, you know, we know they're preparing a draft EIR. We know that.
We know that? I didn't even know that.
Well, yeah, they had the scoping meeting quite a while ago, and then they
About
came
3
back.
years ago.
Yeah,
But the project has totally changed.
well, I have an issue with,
They had a scoping meeting for Marble Valley 12 years ago, and they, so, I mean.
Things move
Yeah.
slow in El Dorado County.
Yes, they do.
well, they do move slow, but, you know, Generations had their scoping meeting here in March, and we have a draft environmental impact report in 107 days. So you want it to be thorough and thoughtful, but like you're saying, hey, what's going on? Is there an update? Is there any information? We know, and like you've described, they did change sort of the, I always want to call it the north part of the project. I don't like that label. Yeah. Into mixed use, which, you know, is an allowed use in a commercial zone, but sort of what we talked about at the scoping meeting is different than, right, than what we are talking about now. So, but we,
So we did have an update just today that
Oh.
John's not aware of. I was just made aware of that Karen's heard about. But there is a project still in the works, but it's going to be substantially different as I understand it from what was originally proposed. So is there more that you can share on that since they were expected to come forward with more detail?
Staff has been in contact recently, and so they will be resubmitting some revised plans. And as soon as those are submitted, we'll make sure and put those on the website for folks to see.
Are they the same plans that they submitted or came public a year ago, 300 apartment units, basically? My understanding
No.
is no, they are not. They're substantially different. You just have to wait to see what they are.
Yeah, and I have not seen the plans. I just know that is no longer part of the conversation.
Yep.
thank you for asking that up front.
Yeah.
Good deal. Tara, you have our question?
Thank you. I've got about three parts to mine. One is when project documents are sent out, DEIRs or EIRs, there's no reason not to put the link on there so people can find the document. This Generations DEIR that went out did not have the project link on it. People are asking me how to find it, all over the internet. Where do we find it? Facebook, next door neighbor. There's no reason not to put the link on there. People have to go into the website. And I know you guys know your website intimately. I knew my huge state website intimately, and I had to explain it to people. I know it's a headache, but if we just put the link on there. Second, really glad for this gentleman's, I've been saying this for years. I was on the HOA board of my HOA briefly, and it was a problem. We had all sorts of agreements that weren't affected. Toronto Water, I won't go into details, but it was big money. It was big agreements. There were so many problems that the development agreement was kicked out very quickly, and it wasn't resolved. It was, so third part of my is we need to condition projects prior to approval. Now, I came on board back in the early 2000s and really hammered that with a group of people. Some are supervisors, some have been past supervisors, but we got the county to acknowledge that that is really the benefit of the county, to condition projects prior to approval. Because if you approve a project, I know I've did it for 35 years and I wore your shoes. And if you're approving a project and you're leading these developers down rose-colored glasses, and then at the very end, you're surprised because you guys got to maybe level out a mountain, a hillside, add a deceleration lane of 300 feet, add drainage, it's millions of dollars. Pave over utilities, lane line to lane line is now as the state required. So these are all millions of dollars that I'm reviewing draft EIRs and I'm not seeing that acknowledged. So these are very significant. I can't hit it even more. Condition before approval. The planning director, we worked with that, the county wrote a resolution that happened back in 2000. So maybe tonight when you guys talk about processes, we can look and you guys can explain to us, is that being done? And what level? Last, very last, I just want to tell a little story. And back in 2002, I've got many people come to me and say, Tara, what is a community region and how does a parcel that's rural or very low density or maybe even agriculture has the designation of agriculture, how can it be that the county's telling us it's acceptable for high density? Back in 2002, 2003, I was attending the board meetings for separate reasons. But there was a group of people, and they were called the Economic Development Committee. It was a group of people that were developers, consultants for developers, and large landholders. And they were, lobbying. They were working on policy, change of policy for their interests. That's how things work. I get it. But I go to these meetings because as an engineer, I wanted to have balance. I was with APAC. I was working on community issues. I wanted to see balance. So I really I was engaged in these community meetings, and I would ask them. In fact, I was very cool in saying, "Can we call it the Economic Development Committee and Responsible Transportation Infrastructure?" And I was literally thrown out of the room. Literally thrown out of the room. So that just tells you what, the balance of, they didn't want that on their projects. I get it. It costs money, but so the community regions were not done by the boards. They were done by a body of citizens that had special interests. My problem was they were board resources, county resources, county meeting rooms, county resources for all their expenses. So I really had a problem with that, and I brought that forward. So community regions were drawn up around these parcels that in the public meeting and the board meetings, and this is on record. I brought up to the board at the time back in 2002, and it's on record. You can search it in the Legistar. And I said that you cannot change a designation without going through CEQA parcel by parcel. I knew because I did CEQA for 35 years. I knew that. The county council went over to the board. They met. They recessed. They met again. They recessed. They met again. And they agreed. They could not do it without doing a CEQA parcel by parcel. It was never done. They agreed. The sitting board says we have 3 members terming out. 3 members, I think it was terming out. So they said, it was either 2 or 3. They said it'll be done at the next board meeting. It wasn't done at the next board meeting. Not the next board meeting, and not the next, and not this board meeting. So we have community regions that are not legally, their wishes, their wants, yes, we'd like to have high intensity density, and that's the county's definition for community regions. The county defines them as high intensity densities, and they're in areas that are so rural and so non-compatible that when we go through these public documents and we do the CEQA review, we've got to look at the legality of the community region in these areas that were plopped down, and we haven't done a parcel by parcel analysis. Because what it says, and the little says is that you have to look at the compatibility and the impacts for these community regions to exist in these areas. So I'll leave it at that. If anybody wants to drill down or ask me questions later, you know how to reach me. Thank you.
Just so real quick, Karen will probably get to either John Davy with that link. Your comment about EDH 52, point taken. In terms of conditioning, I am working with Adam and some of Karen's staff to discuss conditioning projects and how they work, so we can get you that answer, and I'll probably share that with John Davis. And then lastly, regarding your community regions, Karen and I are working with some of our supervisors on some of these areas right now for community regions. So yes, we'll probably get those answers to you. Definitely not today, but in some kind of email form, okay?
I know we're going to get answers. We're going to come at you and we're going to keep talking.
I know, we will.
I think the other thing to add is, as planned, we're looking at a overall general plan amendment, new general plan in the 26-27 timeframe. I think that's what we scheduled it. So we're already focusing on identifying the things that are in the current general plan that never came to fruition and need to be modified and need to be adjusted. And so I would expect, as part of that general plan discussion leading up to that, that there will be a lot of conversation about community regions and rural centers, and because the world has changed since 2004 when that general plan was approved. So we need to get everything as current as we can. We need to project into the future. What do we think it's going to be in 20 years, and redefine a lot of those things. The last time they did the TGPA, which is a general plan amendment and revision of the specific planning, there was a lot of changes that were made. There was rezoning done in certain properties that we've discovered since were not done appropriately, and they had to be reversed by the board. That's why you see general plan amendments on an annual basis. They have to be revised because there were mistakes made in part, right? That's human nature. Mistakes happen. So we've had to make some of those corrections. But what I would focus on, if I were you, is what do we need to identify in the current general plan that needs to be revised? Community regions is one. I'm telling you, that's just the start of it. From the standpoint of a comprehensive general plan review and then a new issue.
TGPA reviewing 3-inch lines. That TGPA is out
Right.
there. Lived it, breathed it. I know. I get. Thank you.
So John, at the, one of the community council meetings a few months ago, you had talked about a general plan
Yes.
revision.
Yep.
So did the board commit to actually doing a full revision as opposed to
To the
doing?
extent we have the resources to commit, these things always run
Yes.
away from you
Yeah,
in terms of costs.
yes, they do.
But there
Well,
is a
I
commitment
think they were
to-
talking you were talking
schedule
about a
for
couple
SWIFT.
$1 million,
Right.
but
That's just the start. That's just
But,
the front
you-
end.
but you know, this is an opportunity, like you said, to correct some mistakes.
Yep.
And also to get it right, to find out what the vision for the future of El Dorado County that the citizens have, the politicians have,
Yep.
everything else. I mean, we're never going to make everyone happy. We know that. But there's probably a lot of good ideas that are out there that we should consider and then see what we can adapt that makes sense and can be approved by the voters.
Exactly, because what we've been doing is piecemeal making corrections of things that just weren't right. But there are things that probably weren't done with enough consideration of the overall impacts it would have at the time it was done. But again, there was a 1999 general plan. There was a lawsuit. The Board of Supervisors had to go back and revisit the whole thing. They were struggling to try to get a general plan approved in 2004. And there's commitments on the front end of the general plan in terms of general statements that are never reflected in the general plan itself relative to open roads and those kinds of things. It was a sales pitch. It wasn't reality related to what's in the general plan. So you can't just take the caption on the sales pitch and say, this is what our general plan is. You have to read section by section what the general plan stipulates and what's allowed. So and there are errors in it. So we recognize that, but we do have a new chance, obviously, to refresh it, to make it more current and look 20 years into the future. So we'll see how this public audience and the staff and stuff are good at projecting into 20 years. Because that's a pretty tough challenge. If you look at where we were in 2004 compared to where we are now, which was a 20-year period, basically, a lot has changed.
Don't say that loud. No talking about mortality. I don't want to hear that. So no, my question is, so obviously 2004, it went to the voters because of the nature of the litigation, and, you know, it's actually a 1996 general plan, and yeah. So we don't anticipate it would go to the voters again?
It's not a requirement that it goes to the voters. I think if you're a considerate representative of the county, you would want it to go participant. You would want it to go to the voters. But that's an expensive process too.
Yeah, well, clearly, yeah.
Cost and time. So is that what the voters would ask for? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. You think it's difficult to try to read through and understand what's in a specific plan proposal or a draft EIR? Try reading the general plan and understanding what's in it. Would the public be able to interpret and understand it? Other than the sales pitch on the front end?
That's fair.
So
Okay.
it's a mixed bag, right? You have to
Yeah.
be informed to be able to properly vote on do you like this or not. So
Okay.
that's to come.
Okay, so are there any more comments in the room before we move? Oh, so do you have a microphone? We'll work our way back. As long as you're green, you can go.
Okay, it's green. My wife and I come to the meetings. Thank you, John, for keeping all of this organized, and, you know, I appreciate it. It's a lot of work. Totally get it. I have a comment about traffic. I don't know if traffic comes up later in the agenda, if this is a good time to talk about it. Let me talk about it now. It's sort of a single.
Speak a little louder.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's sort of a single issue here, so not traffic across the county.
Okay.
So we live in Crescent Ridge, off of, I like to call it Saratoga Speedway, but it's Saratoga Road. 45 miles an hour, that's the limit. Usually people go a lot faster. Our little street is called Finder's Way. It's almost impossible to get in and out of there.
I was out there yesterday, by the way, looking at it again, surveying.
Thank God. Thank you. Two of our neighbors have been in really terrible accidents now on Saratoga Road. One of them totaled his truck. He spent time in the hospital. I don't think he's going to be the same. And another one is a mom with kids who got hit. Both cases are people going over the double yellow line at high speeds and smashing into people. It's a hazard. And I bring it up, first of all, because we're afraid to go that way. You know, you have to spend 10 minutes waiting for a hole in the traffic that's going both directions. And if this is the way the county is going to look at the legacy, the folks that have been here a long time, when there's new development, I mean, that was put through because Saratoga Estates was built. You know, but I feel like the people who have been around a long time are paying the price for a new development. And I just think that's a bad precedent in the county. We should take a look at the people who've been around a long time as well as the new development and consider both of those things as we, you know, as this group kind of goes through all of this debate and evaluation of the new development that's going on. That's my point. Thank you for letting me talk.
And John, can I speak to that?
Ms. Brooke.
Yeah,
Okay, so go ahead, Brooke.
just to the speaker, I too live on Flat Circle, and we've done a few meetings with the transportation department, and Raphael, I think the last meeting, we were assured that after 2 accidents at that location, that would be enough to prompt a 3-way stop. And I know that we've had more than just the 2, we've had 4. So I'm hoping that with that data, we can get the 3-way stop that was promised.
So when that intersection was first built several years ago, actually Brooke is correct. Her and I started communicating immediately in terms of the impacts, the circulation on that roadway. And I told her that I promised her that I would look into that intersection and study it religiously for the first few years to make sure that there weren't any issues. And sure enough, for the first 2 years, there weren't. As of lately, yes, there have been a few accidents. And so actually, my traffic engineer is going to be going over what is called a traffic warrant analysis later on in today's presentation. That is the metrics that we use, which is handed down to us by the federal government and state of California to determine how we can justify the installation of either stop signs or a signal or some kind of traffic mitigation like a roundabout or left turn pockets. And so then we've analyzed that location for it. And I do want to wait until Zach gets to that presentation because it'll be easier to show you the determination as to how we've gotten to that. But because of those new accidents, I will have my staff look into it and see if it has crossed the threshold of it. Because just because there are 2 accidents doesn't mean that we automatically. Go ahead.
Raphael, it's not just 2 accidents. It's over 6 accidents at this point, but it's 2 that had serious bodily injury.
Okay, well, I don't doubt that, and we work very closely with CHP to get that data so that we can utilize that metrics to justify the implementation of traffic control at that location. So with that said, yes, I was out there with Supervisor Heidel. That intersection is on my radar 24/7. I also have other locations within the El Dorado Hills area that either have worse level of service or higher traffic accidents. And so then that's what I, as the director, have to make sure that we are utilizing our funds and that we are meeting our metrics. And or if accidents are becoming an issue, what is it and why? Is it because of increase in volume? If it is, or increase in speed, do I need to work with CHP? Do I need to make modifications out there? So yes, I will look into that and I will get that information to Brooke. I have her email address in my address book, as well as John Davey, so that he can pass that information along to you. Okay, thank you.
The other thing to recognize is not every accident is reported to the
Unfortunately,
CHP.
they're not.
And the CHP isn't obligated in all cases unless there's a fatality to come out and take a report. So a lot of fender benders happen, people exchange driver's licenses. There's no way DOT can understand what happened in that kind of an accident, short of the public informing them. And then it's, well, where's the data? How do we know what really happened? Who was it? What was the cause? Was it excessive speed? Was it
John,
go ahead.
Just to that point, there are crash data sites. We use them in litigation all the time that do track this data, even if there isn't a CHP report. But along those lines, I just wanted to highlight too that this is a school zone and a bus zone. It's a bus drop off and pickup. So I just would like that factor because I know that that's another condition that you have to look at when evaluating if you need to stop.
I'll look into it. Okay, I will definitely look into that, Brooke. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brooke, isn't the posted speed limit 45 along that section of roadway?
I think it's 55.
No, it's 45.
45 posted.
45,
So
yeah.
if it was
I
a
think
school
it's
zone,
posted. I think it's posted beyond, like, so the Folsom side, we'd have to go and see. But with the first sign, I think for us is beyond the intersection. So as you're coming down the hill, you're coming from, our El Dorado hillsides. I can't recall exactly if there's a sign in between the Saratoga, the new turn in for them, and the stop sign on Wilson, but I know that there's a sign after Finders. It's like literally right at the intersection there, a little ways down. That's where the first speed sign is.
yeah, but my point is, I don't think it's a school zone. It would have to be marked 25 miles an hour. So
No,
While
it's
school is
the
present.
bus. It's the school bus pickup and drop off,
oh,
and
that's
then it's
different.
the main.
That's,
It's
okay,
the
that's
main.
different. Yep.
It's the main
Yep.
ingress and egress to Brooks Elementary School. So
Okay,
that
thank you.
Finders takes you along, and so it should be marked because Folsom marks it for going through the neighborhood. They mark it for that elementary school there, but for some reason we don't mark it for ours.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brooke.
No problem.
So, put a microphone there. Who's next? Let's see. You have a microphone back there? All right, you're good. As long as you're green, please go.
Okay, I come today representing some of my fellow Heritage Village residents who were denied the right to appeal the Planning Commission CUP 23-0009 decision to approve an aesthetically offensive monopine cell tower. Our appeal included the full text of the APAC findings in opposition. I request that Supervisors Turnbow and Supervisor Heidel, in addition to Karen Gardner, intercede on our appeal so it can be held. Please consider the following. In December 2023 and February 2024, APAC submitted 2 sets of questions, concerns, and comments about the Verizon proposed tower located within 100 feet of a 55-plus community of 1,000 homes and multiple schools. APAC raised many issues relating to the location with reference to potential health, real estate values, and visual impacts. Local heritage residents wrote letters and testified at hearings in opposition of the cell towers and in support of APAC findings. On May 11th, 3 members of the Planning Commission voted to ignore the comments of APAC and local residents and did not and approved the installation of the monopine. I must add that one commissioner was absent and another had to recuse himself because he lives in Heritage. 2 weeks later, the full 5 members of the Planning Commission voted 5-0 to deny another Verizon monopie application on the same exact identical objections that we brought up, and that was raised by APAC. The inconsistencies of the 2 are glaring. Heritage residents immediately downloaded the county appeals forms and instructions and followed the entire process according to your procedures to the T. The instructions did not reference any fee. We submitted everything in a timely manner per the instructions. 2 days before closing, I received a call from an employee of the planning staff stating that the appeal would be denied if a $475 fee was not delivered by 5 p.m. on that Friday. We immediately sought a waiver of the fees based upon procedure B12, as the fee represents an undue financial burden for seniors on a fixed income. This request remains unanswered and appears to be dead in the water. In the meantime, the multi-billion-dollar company Verizon was able to pay the fee and appeal the rejection of the Planning Commission on the second monopine tower, and a hearing is being set before the BOS. Is that equality? Is that equity? Where is the equity in this process? As a group of seniors, we feel abandoned by the county. The county has a process to waive fees and should do so immediately and move our appeal to a full hearing so its merits can be heard, and also the findings of the APAC can be considered. Supervisor Turnbow, Supervisor Heidel, Director Gardner, please take action and do the fair, equitable thing. I ask for your commitment to do the right thing. Thank you on behalf of the Heritage Senior Community.
I don't know if you guys can respond tonight, but.
I just looked at the appeal form and it says right at the top, appeals must be submitted to the planning department with the appropriate appeal fee. So I don't know how that would not be read as part of filling out the appeal form, because we required it to be there. Fees can be different depending upon the type of appeal.
The fees are not clearly stated in the area where they have the Personally, the fees I consider double taxation. We already pay county taxes, Belarus, sales taxes, LLID fees. We should not have to pay for something that we're already paying for.
Okay, you have an opinion. It costs the county a lot of resource time every time an appeal is filed.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to pay for those appeals if they're not paid by the people who are taking action
You're
to
already
challenge
getting
it?
paid for it.
So what,
You need
what,
to,
well,
you need to
okay.
streamline your processes.
well,
instead of-
we've done a lot of
instead
that. So
gouging the public.
I would suggest you talk to your supervisor directly because we have streamlined a lot of processes and there's always more work to be done.
I don't want to argue about this.
Okay.
Can I just, not either side, it's more a general. Okay, so I work for the state of California. A lot of projects I was oversight was communication projects, large communication projects. I've learned a lot about communication industry. I've worked 22 years in El County, Verizon, different, to call it Verizon. What I'm seeing a huge amount of these huge monopines coming into El Dorado County. I'm not sure what the funding is, if the county's getting a share of that or, it just, okay, so I just throw that out there. But
It's nothing out of it.
what that's good to know. What I want to share with you guys is a lot of these monopines already have coverage. They can go on a shared pole. They choose not to because they want to charge other providers, other smaller. So I'm seeing this lot to everybody get these monopines in. On the planning commission, I think yesterday was one down at Sandridge. I know that takes more than, probably better than anybody. I used to drive it like every day. And what it is, those pictures that they showed on the planning commission was deceiving because it's looking up. When you're driving Highway 59, which I believe is a scenic corridor, you're looking down at that monopine and that thing is huge. It did not have, so I'm just wanting to share, kind of be careful because there's, I've seen now that I was virtual and I saw some pretty not accurate visualization of those. Being in the industry, doing a lot of research and doing the engineering on the ground application of putting them in. I see there's not, I want to say there's not a, I don't want to say a necessity, but you can do it with smaller repeaters. You can do it with small roles. Hence, I think I repeated, I said this before in a board meeting that one of my projects was up at Whitehall. That was the one person came in, they wanted to put these 10-foot caissons drilled down into Sierra bedrock. Yeah, they actually wanted to do, and they wanted to do like 12 of those. 12.
I think the bigger problem is safety issue with 5G towers. It's really untested. It has been unproven. There's no health study been done on it. And the property owners that are sticking these ugly things in people's neighborhoods and in shopping centers on top of fire stations, they're only doing it because they're receiving money from either Verizon, T-Mobile, or whoever else. These towers are ungodly. They do absolutely nothing for the speed or your telephone connection. Actually, when you go down Silver Valley Road and Serrano Parkway, which it's a dead zone for Verizon, you guys, not you guys, the phone company or whoever authorized that erected 2 towers in the stadium at the school. I don't even have kids that go to that school, but if I did have kids, I wouldn't send them to that stadium or that school for anything because they're being fried by these microwaves literally from both sides of the bleachers and no one seems to care. It's like, oh, it's okay, nothing happens. We had a small city in Central Valley that just banned a tower in an elementary school because of cancer increases in little kids. There's no studies done on it. And if you take an RFI
Federal
meter,
government that regulates that.
no, I understand
They're
that,
pretty
but
much tied relative.
do we have to do everything federal government says it's okay? Do we have to do everything if federal government says it's okay?
Want to be subjected to a lawsuit? I guess.
I'll mention too that
They will
we're
sue
actually
you if you
making an
don't put these
update.
in?
We're
So
making
we've
an update
become
to our
like Soviet
wireless.
Union now?
But let her speak. She's.
I'm
more
sorry, go ahead.
knowledgeable.
We're updating our wireless telecommunication facilities ordinance. So that'll be coming to the Planning Commission, I believe, next month. So keep an eye out for that because that's an opportunity. The way we regulate those, that's an opportunity for the public to be involved and shape that ordinance. But to Supervisor Heidel's point, it is very highly regulated industry. And so there are some things we just cannot do.
You cannot say no to it? Is that what you're telling me?
There are times, yes, being in traffic, same thing. If they meet certain thresholds, whether it's the federal government or the state, there are times when our hands are tied. And then we find ourselves liable with either one of those organizations. So
They actually force you to put 5G towers?
they
in your county?
essentially inform us that these are the requirements and you
When an
need to meet them.
application is submitted, you have to honor that
Now,
application.
we do have some leeway, and like Karen said,
We're getting way off
Yeah, we
track
are.
here.
next month would be the time for you all to give your input and get information. That's why Karen
And
and
I
I are here.
beg of the council a favor for all the residents of El Dorado County. Let's have these meetings before erecting towers, before placing warehouses,
Start the planning
before authorizing even talking about new projects. So we
Next
don't get to the point of Saratoga way that you go, oh, we'll study it and see how bad is it before we take action on it. The action should be taken prior to those 6 accidents, the 2 fatalities or
Part of an
injuries.
EIR review.
I understand that. If you provide enough time and clarity for the citizens, I greatly appreciate it because I think we don't want to become Folsom. I said this in the first and last meeting that I came here. It was my first meeting and it was the last meeting I was here. We want to avoid becoming Folsom. We want to avoid becoming Roseville. And you as custodians of the people that live in El Dorado County need to fight tooth and nail not to allow that to happen. We live here because it's El Dorado. No, I agree with you 100%. But really, we need your help to try to fight on our behalf.
Sure.
And if you don't want to do it, we understand. Let's get somebody that does.
Sure.
You know, I understand it. I mean, it's a painful job what you guys go through. I'm
So
sure
next month. So
the
next
money,
month,
if there is anything, it's
I get
not
it. So
worthwhile,
next
but
month-
Follow the general plan.
But-
So
but
that's
I-
really where
like-
the impact is.
Like you were saying, we're getting off topic. So
Yes, we
next
are.
month, please, by all means, go to the planning commission. That's going to be the perfect time for those comments. By
thank
all
you
means.
so much.
Thank you.
That's where those hearings are held.
Yeah.
You know, we got to wrap it up because we got.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to it's.
More on this.
Hold
We
on.
gotta get moving here.
Yeah.
The appeal of the fee, we have not heard anything from the county. You guys aren't even following your own procedures.
I would say, you know, obviously, as volunteers, and you as a resident, with, you know, we're not going to resolve it anytime. But thank you for sharing it. But I think the point is well made that you know, Supervisor Turnbull obviously is that you're in his district. That you probably that's probably like the first place you should start. If you've already talked to the planning department and you haven't got what you think you. Well, yeah.
She's taking a lot of notes right
Writing
now.
down,
She's
right as
writing
we
it
speak.
down.
So
Response,
yes.
everything. So
Yes.
She'll get back to
But
you.
no, but I just want to say Supervisor Turnbull is somebody you should probably be consulting with a lot. Okay.
Okay, good.
So one final thing on cell towers, public safety is one of the major things the county looks at. And I know there are people very adjacent to proposed cell towers that have 0 reception most of the time. What happens when there's an evacuation order because a fire is coming down and they can't pick up their phone? Because people have given up their landlines, right? If you don't have a mobile phone and connected to a tower, you can get reception. You don't know you're supposed to be leaving. So
But
public
John,
safety is one of
9
the reasons
feet.
why we look at cell towers. And there's always an alternative of one single tower, alternate sites, or multiple towers. But when you talk about replacing a single tower with 3 towers, now you're impacting 3 communities.
Yeah, but
Yeah. Okay, guys, we don't have time for this tonight.
Come to the meeting and,
Okay.
August.
Come to the
But
community.
but there's one more
council.
back here. Can we go right here? And because we got to wrap up our public comment.
So one comment about John Heidel, you said that there was public comment on the Gateway project.
Yes.
I do not remember any public discussion on that. All I remember is that it was ministerially approved by one person. And up goes these 6 tall buildings. And we had nothing really to say about it in the community. So that was my first comment to something you said. The other thing I wanted to talk about is more directed at Raphael, and that is our Carson Crossing Road. This has been brought up before by residents of Heritage. And as I understand it, the road designation for Carson Crossing is a neighborhood connector.
Yes.
Okay, so to me, that would mean that first of all, there should be some speed limit signs on that road. And I really don't think there are any. At least if they're at the beginning, I haven't seen any. I've been there 5 years. I haven't noticed speed limit signs. I would suggest 35 to 40 miles an hour because there's houses on both sides. Okay, the other problem that is coming up more and more is the construction trucks are using Carson Crossing as a cut through to get to their construction sites. And not only are they using Carson Crossing as a cut through, they're using Las Palmas, which goes right through the heritage community, all houses. Now, I don't see why this is taking place if it's been designated that this is a neighborhood connector. So how is this still happening? One reason it's still happening, there are no signs up stating no construction traffic. I mean, a big sign written in Spanish and English maybe, because I've tried to talk to a couple of the truck drivers and they don't speak English, which is fine, but they need to be able to communicate, or the sign needs to communicate to them. So this road, as I mentioned, divides our community, Heritage Village, into 2 parts. That means the seniors are trying to cross over Carson Crossing without a speed limit control. And I understand there's always people who are going to go over the speed limit, but without any signs up, people are going 50, 60 miles an hour on that road. And they're not stopping at the stop sign at Las Palmas and Carson Crossing. They're sliding through it, or they're just straight on going through it.
So
This is a hazard to our residents.
It is. So yesterday I was out there with Supervisor Heidel and Supervisor Turnbull. And you are correct. I did see construction traffic to my
Yes, you
amazement.
can hear it. It's starting at 6 in the morning. Sorry.
So I am going to have my staff look into what we need to do to restrict them from utilizing that location as construction crossing. As for the speed limit signs, I wasn't aware that there's no speed limit signs. I'm surprised if there isn't, but I will make sure that my staff looks into it. And
Thank you.
I thought there was, but I will confirm. And then I'll let you know what the traffic study was, because we have to perform a traffic study.
I
because there
know.
was speed limit signs, or what the speed limit signs needed to be adjusted for, and then I'll get you that information.
That would be
Actually, I'll give it to
great.
John, and then
Can I
John
give you my
pass that along.
name and address, name and phone number as I leave?
Sure, I can either give it to John, or I could give it to you.
You want to give it to me and I can make sure Raphael
Yeah,
gets it.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's what I usually do.
Okay. And the other day, there were 3 trucks that left the new construction site, the Gateway project. And they all 3 were headed right up Carson Crossing, right out of their gates. And I went, wait a minute, I went to the construction truck, the construction trailer. And I said, look, this is connector road. It's not for trucks. It's not for construction trucks. And the guy was really pleasant. He was very, very nice. He said he would mention it to the boss and all that. Scott, who's in charge of that project, we've already talked to him about it, and he says he's been directing traffic onto Golden Foothill Parkway. And that's fine, but they're not getting the message. They need a huge sign.
I will make sure that that
And
message
it
comes
needs
across.
to go up, not
No weight
I'm
not
restriction
down
on
the
the road.
road somewhere.
We're
It
gonna-
needs to go up now.
There is no weight restriction on the road, right?
There isn't.
There
but
is
all
no
I
bridge
know-
on the road.
Because I'll tell you,
There's no
somebody,
restricting traffic,
But once again,
except for special circumstances.
there are special circumstances. If it is a collector and it's not
You know-
designated a truck route, I can do something about it.
Okay.
I just want to let you know, I want to move forward. I am going to do something and I will get back to him
And
and
I'm-
he'll get back to you, for sure.
piggybacking on this gentleman's comments about Finders Way and Saratoga Avenue, there are dangerous places in our communities. And really, instead of all these studies, we just want action. We really want something, okay, so you've got our position on this, please do something.
And I will get to that when my staff talks to you a little bit more about what we do on a regular basis. I will address that. So thank you very much.
Can I respond to Gateway real quick? Gateway is a multi-staged or multi-phased project. There is a parcel split in progress that has to go through a public review process, if I understand it right. So that is what is still available. The two warehouses that were built were approved. They're constructed. It is the proposed parcel splits are subject to public review.
They were approved by one person in the county, and that's ministerially.
Right. Right?
For this, right?
Input on that approval to say, we don't want these construction.
I understand your argument. Okay.
Okay.
Warehouse size buildings, they're like 2-3 stories
We're gonna
high,
talk about
really,
that
I think,
today.
too.
Okay. And they're going to cover it a little bit in their presentation, so we need to try to get to the presentation.
Can I just jump in very quickly? Members of APAC have sat down and looked at the gateway traffic. And we have a retired traffic engineer. And we were looking at different calming things that could be put on that particular road. For example, limiting trucks of a certain weight. They couldn't be on there. Possibly speed humps rather than speed bumps. Things along that line. So people are looking at it and they're working at it. And I know that you're going to look at it and work at it also.
Yes.
I mean, I ride a bike on that road. I don't particularly like to share a road with a cement truck. Okay, so people are working on that. Thank you.
Understandable. Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
We're wrapping up. Oh, sorry. I borrow a microphone. So, too much of me. Okay, well, thank you. In the future, when we have a larger audience, we'll probably just start limiting it to 3 minutes for the comments, or we'll ask, we'll ask how many people have comments, because we want to make sure that if you have a comment, you have the time. I hate telling people, hey, we need to hurry up, but we need to hurry up. So, but thank you for being here, and I'm certain that they heard you. So that's important. So moving along. We always remind everybody, how do you become a voting member of APAC? If you live in El Dorado Hills, you're a member already. If you want to be a voting member and determine who's the officers or how we vote on projects, we ask you to work on a project review or a subcommittee. And if you don't think you're able to do that, or you don't know how to do that, neither do we. So anybody who's been here helping will help you learn about how we approach it. It's very possible you have an approach that might benefit us that we haven't considered. So anybody's interested, all of our email addresses are on the top of our agenda. We have an email address on our website. So moving along, Supervisor Turnbull I didn't see him online with us tonight. So Supervisor Heidel, do you have comments prepared for tonight?
I just have one quick one, because we gave you an update at the community council meeting, and there hasn't been any more meeting since, but El Dorado County is one of 7 counties to receive placement of the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection's Fire Risk Reduction List. This recognition highlights local agencies throughout the state that meet the best practices for local fire planning. The county is doing some very positive things. On June 19th, the Board of Forestry adopted a resolution to approve the 2024 Risk Reduction Community List, where they became effective July 1st. Placement on the fire risk reduction list, a significant accomplishment for El Dorado County, is a testament to the collaboration and dedication of our partner agencies and county departments, including members of CAL FIRE, local fire districts, county planning and building department, or sheriff's office of emergency services. There are two main benefits associated with the El Dorado County's placement on this list. First, designation as a fire risk reduction community is a critical factor included in the California Insurance Commissioner Safer from Wildfires, which should give you discount on your fire insurance programs if it all works correctly. No guarantees, right? Combined with defensible space and other fire prevention actions, this designation provides residents within the unincorporated area of the county with an additional opportunity to receive discounts on our homeowners insurance premiums. Second, El Dorado County's inclusion on this list allows it to receive priority for certain wildfire prevention grants, getting money to prevent the wildfires. And if anybody who was local in the area recognized the two recent fires we had, the Moccasin Fire and the Pay Fire. The Pay Fire almost took out the Placerville Airport, a lot of residents up there. So we are definitely in a high risk area, and all of these efforts are helping reduce that risk, and it's being recognized. That's the message. The county's done, I think, a lot to try to help us get to that point. We've looked at adopting a revised vegetation management ordinance. There's been opposition to that because it's too expensive to provide defensible space on your property, but yet it's okay to allow the fire to occur and jump to your neighbor's property. I don't understand that logic. We have to find the funding somehow to make sure that people on fixed incomes and stuff get the assistance they need to take out defensible space, to make defensible space, and it's not going to happen overnight. But you have to establish the requirements or everybody ignores it. So I just wanted to present something positive for a change in terms of one of the things I think that really sets the county apart from 41 other counties, 51 other counties, right? So there's only 7 recognized here. So it's 51 minus 7, right?
Okay.
So I was trying to do the math.
58 minus 7.
58 minus 7, 51. Thank you. 58 minus 7 is 51. So anyway, I'm done.
I just want to add something to that. I think many of you know I sit on the El Dorado Hills Fire Board as well. Over 75% of El Dorado, the area within the El Dorado Hills is in a very high risk or very high risk fire section. Now you may see manicured lawns, you may see, in Serrano and stuff like that, but a lot of Serrano, even with all the green space that they have, it's in a very high risk
Wildland
area.
urban interface.
Wildland urban interface. And so getting this grant or getting the opportunity to get grants because of this designation is huge because it doesn't take much. A chain rattling along and there's some brush 10 feet away, a spark goes out and it goes up and everything is drier than hell right now. It's hot. And you see what our firefighters, the men and women that are out there, CAL FIRE, our local firefighters, they're working tremendously long hours. They're doing the job that they want to do. They want to protect the community, but we as a community, we have to step up. I don't like the idea of taking out a lot of my shrubs and plants that are in front of my house, but I've slowly been doing it. I've been buying 5 yards of gravel at a time, and I've been laying it out next to the side of the house. I still have to keep working my way around. I don't like it. I don't like the look of it, but it's going to protect it, maybe make me easier to get fire insurance. And also it does protect the community as a whole. So sign up. It's not great to do it. I don't want to take out some trees. I don't want to take out rose bushes, but I can move them around and they'll survive somewhere else.
I would like to speak on that. I'm from Four Seasons. And Four Seasons that had the fire department come down and talk to us what has to be moved and what should be done. Okay, and our HOA has eaten the cost of having companies come in and trim all of the trees so they don't touch the house, that they're a certain distance from the house. And we're also looking into that requirement where you have to have no wood fences touch the house, so a metal gate, metal wood gate. All right, they were talking about that today. Heritage has that already, the metal gate and the wing fences. Okay, so I want to say, Four Seasons HOA has bit the bullet and they paid to have the trees taken out. If you followed all the regulations, you'd have to cut everything 4 feet from your house. All right, all the vegetation.
No, ladder fuels is where you get
Okay,
into.
well, I think the thing is, if it's a woody plant, it should be 4 to 5 feet away from the house.
Agreed, agree.
Okay.
That's a new requirement that's coming.
Yeah.
It hasn't hit yet.
No one has been enforcing it except for the insurance companies who won't give you insurance anyway. You're not gonna get homeowners insurance, okay? You're gonna have to go to something like, what used to be called, when you couldn't get car insurance. Yeah, so, you know, and I'm gonna end on that. So there are communities that are paying, to, make their homes, safe from fire.
Yeah, and it's the right thing to do in the big picture.
And there'll be more coming. You know, California's looking at a lot of different laws or ordinances to sort of enforce that. So that was all from Supervisor Heidel. Was there any response or any questions? So we'll move forward. So we have a twofer. It's not even Tuesday. But we had planned for a long time to have Director Martinez come talk about transportation issues. But we've been engaged with Karen, I'm sorry, Director Gardner. Karen, sorry, try to be friendly. But we've been engaged with APAC, with our environmental committees, and just a long dialogue with planning staff and with transportation staff. So we're happy tonight that we have both of them here at the same time, which means you might be here a little longer. So I apologize now, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward. And how do you want to be here and do?
We'll just be here.
Want to drive from there as long as you're green? As long as you're green when you go. Would you like a handheld microphone instead?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Except for them. Good.
All right. Well, then I'm going to start this. I'm going to turn this over to you, and I think you just yell at me when you want me to go forward.
First of all, I just want to first and foremost say thank you, John, for inviting us here. Thank you, public, for having Karen and I here. By the way, this is Karen Gardner and I'm Rafael Martinez, in case you're wondering who's who. But the reason why we're here is because we hear you. So every time I've come here, I get a lot of questions and a lot of different projects and a lot of different things. And so then finally, Karen and I said, you know what? We need to start disseminating some information to all you so you guys know what we're at and what we have to deal with. Some of the constraints, as we were talking about, either the federal government or the state, and what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Because yes, we are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that we are representing you to the best of our abilities. But sometimes we have restrictions. And so then you don't know about them. And so this is going to be a good opportunity to have a good, positive conversation, back and forth collaboration between the departments and the community as to what we have to do on a regular basis. So if this goes well, Karen and I are calling this developmental entitlement processes 101. So if this goes well, we can maybe come back in 6 months and do 2.0. But like I said, it's collaborative. Karen and I are here to talk to you and represent you. And so we're hoping that we can work together in getting you guys information, going to plan commission meetings when they come up. So we're working together to solve whatever issues we have within the public. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Karen. Oh, afterwards, we will be talking about 2 different projects within the El Dorado County Business Park having to do with the intersection and Gateway and John Adams School Academy. But that's why I have my staff here. Karen's much more smarter than I. She's here by herself answering all planning questions. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Karen.
And yeah, and I will say thank you again. Remind everybody, thank you both for being here because you don't have to do this. I know you, you know, we're all here late and we have lives, but Raphael is essentially a member of APAC at this point because he's here so much. So with that, Director, take it away.
Right, thank you. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll just give a quick overview of what we're going to cover, what I'm going to cover, and that's project entitlement process, which sounds really boring, and it really is truly, but I'm going to try and bring in some of the examples and, you know, some of the questions that came up and use examples specific to El Dorado Hills as I'm talking about that. So maybe it makes a little more sense. And then highlight how you can stay informed or get involved with these projects, and a little bit about how planning and Department of Transportation work together. A lot of people have had that question. You know, when we're planning roads, how do we know, how does DOT know what projects are coming in? So I'll cover that, and then I'll turn it back over to Raphael so he can talk about some of his projects. So on the next slide starts the project entitlement process. So I'm going to talk about, came up earlier, discretionary versus ministerial. So first I'm going to walk through a discretionary process, and that is when someone brings an application to the planning department because they need an entitlement. An entitlement is, I need a subdivision map, I need a conditional use permit, or a design review. And that also means there is some discretion in reviewing that. Oftentimes that ends up going to planning commission, may go to the board, may be administratively approved, may go to the zoning administrator. Who it goes to is all defined in our zoning ordinance. So if you ever wonder, there are some neat little charts in the zoning code that say, if it's this type of application, it is going to go here to, whichever approving body. So again, that's defined by our zoning code. We don't, have discretion on, I can't look at an application and say, I think this one should just be handled by me. I'm going to approve this subdivision. That'll never happen. So then after we get in that application, we take a look at it. And one of the earlier things that we do is called Technical Advisory Committee. We send out the project information, copy of the application and the materials to other divisions and departments like Department of Transportation and any agencies that we think would be interested. Could be school district, almost always whatever the fire district is, could be PG&E, other utilities, water districts, etc. They all give us comments back, and that starts forming the basis of the conditions of approval. So they're telling us, hey, this project looks okay here and here, but to meet our standards, we need to put these conditions on it. So that's when we start talking about conditions of approval. Then the next stage is typically the environmental review. And we take a look at the project and determine what level of environmental review does it need to go through. Is this exempt? Some smaller projects may have exemptions in the CEQA code. Others may require an EIR. So we make that determination, and the applicant then has to provide any documentations. Oftentimes they know ahead of time. I mean, if it's a big project, if it's something like the projects that are of interest right now, these general plan amendments, large scale subdivisions, they know already it's an EIR and they're going to have to do that. And often they start that way ahead of time. But sometimes it is a little bit of a, not quite sure which path to go down. After the environmental review, then it goes to the approving authority. Again, as I mentioned, that is all in the zoning code, who's going to approve it. Going back to the question about conditions of approval, by that point in time, we have the staff report, we have all the analysis, we have the environmental documents, we have the conditions of approval all spelled out. That is part of the staff report. So when the approving body is reviewing and approving that project, they're approving those conditions of approval. Those conditions of approval have been looked at by the applicant, they've been looked at by county staff, they've been looked at by all the agencies that have any interest in the project. So those conditions of approval get approved as part of that project.
Make a brief comment. Planning Commission in particular always looks for, are there modifications to those proposed conditions to make it clearer, to make it more specific, or are there missing conditions that should be added? And that's their job, to review all that, to listen to the public input, to listen to all the documentation that's there and determine are those conditions adequate or not. And when they're not, they'll propose changes to it. So
yep,
that's
absolutely.
part of that integral process.
Yep,
So
that.
the real quick question, the conditions of approval, does the public get to see them?
Yep.
Does the public get to see them before the project?
It's all published on
Yes.
Registar.
Yes. It would be, so if you're familiar with going into Legistar to look at information, it's going to be one of the documents in Legistar.
Those, and they're very generalized. They're not nuts and bolts stuff that's going to cost the big money when the projects are done. So that's one of my big concerns.
So in addition to the conditions of approval, if there was, for example, especially an environmental impact report, EIR, that also is going to have mitigation measures as part of it. And those look a lot like conditions of approval, but they're specifically related to mitigating the environmental impacts. But that is where some of those requirements come in. That also is adopted at the same time. The whole package is adopted, the environmental document, the mitigation measures that are part of that environmental document, the conditions of approval. And then again, for larger projects, there may also even be a development agreement. And that development agreement also has additional requirements, and those can be big things too. So if you remember back to your favorite project, Central El Dorado Hills specific plan, there was a lot of requirements that would have been part of that development agreement had that been approved, to put in roadways, to put in pedestrian overcrossings, trying to think of what else was in there, parks, additional parks. So there was a lot of big requirements in that development agreement. So again, all that gets approved at the same time when it goes to planning commission, or planning commission usually in large projects is making a recommendation to the board.
And I've had, oh, thank you. And I've had, this was like the same topic, John, like 10, 15 years ago, is that we see a lot of conditions of approval and mitigations, but they're on the general level. A lot of the expensive infrastructure that's needed is not put in. And then once the project goes in, it's like, wow, we need just case in
Should all
point.
be spelled out in there. And so
I read them. I read them.
They have the bigger costs typically,
Yeah.
right? Because that's something that the developer has
Okay.
to step up, agree to pay separate from conditions of approval, which are usually a lower level of expense.
What I've always asked for as a civil engineer is there should be some level of design prior, off-site design. We see all the on-site, right? Prior to approval. But we came to the board many years ago and worked with existing DOT and planning commission, planning director, and we got headway on that they were going to work out condition more of the site. Case in point, Francisco.
Talk about
Case in point.
cumulative impacts. I think.
No, okay, case in point, Francisco and Edward Hills Boulevard. They were going to put a burger joint and a gas station, right? The site improvements weren't even looked at. The project got approved. It wasn't a gas station, a burger joint. It was a memory care home. But I went with them and I basically did the design for them. I showed them, we need a sidewalk, we need sight distance, we need, widening here, we need a curvature, we need all of this stuff. That wasn't even done prior to approval. All that ice site wasn't done prior to approval. So the county had to go back and do that. Now, who pays for that when the county goes back and does that? Is it passed on to us, the residents, the existing residents?
I'll tell you it's not. And I did have a meeting set with Adam Payne, who is my development engineer, who does oversee, who does oversee those kinds of projects. And I will have him answer that question a little bit later on to your point, Tara. I don't want to go too much into the weeds because
Yeah,
and I have
okay.
a lot to get through, but yes.
Real
point
big
taken.
off-site improvements. I just want to
Yes.
make sure we
Got it.
Thank you.
One real quick question. Can you explain to all of us how, you said that a large developer will know that an EIR is required ahead of time and will start working on it. Who decides which environmental firm is used? Is it the developer can choose a selected list of approved ones by the county? Or does the county say, okay, here's 6 or 7 firms that we use, and this development project comes in and we pull a number 1 through 6, and this is the one that's going to get assigned to it. So how does that work? Because I think sometimes the perception is that the developer gets to choose which environmental firm he wants, and that there's some sort of like a conflict of interest because that firm is representing the developer, not necessarily the county and the citizens.
Yeah, we have a pre-approved list of environmental consulting firms, and The way we select them is usually pretty much always based on availability and, what other projects they may be working on and making sure that there's no conflicts there. A developer can have their own environmental person, or firm, but then we require that it's all peer reviewed by a separate environmental firm that we control the contract. The developer's paying for that, but we control that contract.
So basically, the developer is then paying for a peer review that we are hiring to oversee that they are not cooking the books or hiding any numbers anywhere, and as well as Karen's staff, as well as my staff. So the same thing goes for traffic engineering analysis reports. Same thing goes. We have a list that they choose from, and then we have our own contractor, consultant, that then peer reviews their analysis, and then my staff also takes a look at it. So that's how we make sure we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's, that yes, they are doing things appropriately.
Thank you.
Okay.
So give you an example of a discretionary project, the Gateway tentative map that they are processing right now to further subdivide the parcels out there. That is a discretionary project and will have a public hearing. In that case, our zoning code, if you go in there, it says that would go to the zoning administrator. Again, that's a discretionary action. Now I'm going to go through ministerial and I'll refer back to Gateway when I talk about that.
That's a real big question. How does it go to the zoning administrator?
Correct.
It goes
Per code, if you-
it goes to zoning administrator. That's what the code says. It goes to the zoning administrator to determine.
On a specific plan or any?
No.
Discretionary.
No. For that particular, for Gateway's tentative map.
Why Gateway's tentative map? What makes that special that it goes?
Tentative map. So again, you
Okay, so
go
a
to our
tentative
zoning
map-
code,
Thank
you look at all the different types of applications
So a tentative
It'll-
map can go
to the zoning administrator.
zoning when it gets.
Yeah.
So any tentative map can come in and go to the zoning administration for future growth, future development, rise in number of houses on that high density community region.
That's a subdivision map now
That's
that you're talking
different.
about. That's
Subdivision map is
different.
totally
We're talking about houses. So
Yeah.
tentative map is either 4 or fewer lots or if it is a commercial subdivision.
Okay, I thought I read Generations was a tentative map. Is that,
We're talking about Gateway.
is Generations a tentative map?
Generations is a tentative subdivision map.
Tentative subdivision map.
Yeah.
So they can come back in and go to zoning or go to zoning.
No, that'll go to Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. The other difference is too, when we're talking about projects like Generations or Lime Rock Marble Valley, all of those have multiple entitlements. Not only do they have a map, they're usually asking for general plan amendment, specific plan amendment, multiple things. Those, when you start adding all those in, and again, you go look at our zoning code, those will say that's got to go both to the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the board. So even if there's a tentative map as part of that, it's sort of whatever the most intensive process is, all the applications will go through that.
Things like cell towers have to go through the planning commission. They don't have to go to the board of supervisors. So on the level of the project, whether it has to go to the board of supervisors as well as the planning commission, or whether the planning commission has the final authority to make an approval or disapproval, which can be appealed then to the board of supervisors. So that's, we had to put together, I guess, a decision tree or something that describes all
I
that.
mean,
I was just going to ask for that, and just a one-page decision tree because I'm really confused. And I think I know this pretty well. I'm very confused on what goes to the zoning.
Where you separate them, but there's some discretion involved too.
Well, and not only that, I mean, the zoning ordinance, it's a pretty comprehensive and very big document. So to make a one-page thing, that's gonna be tough, but the other thing I was gonna say is, like, if we can hold comments until we get through the presentation, because we have a lot to get through tonight. We want to make sure that we get the presentation in because we have them here tonight, so.
And that one question question on when does it go to the zoning administrator?
All right, so moving on again to ministerial process. So that is when someone can come in and just go straight to building permit process. So they don't need any entitlements from planning. They can just get a building permit. Now, there's still a lot of standards they have to meet. They have to meet building code and any county standards and requirements. So even those applications get reviewed oftentimes by DOT, almost always by planning, in addition to building, sometimes environmental management. A lot of single-family homes that are built are ministerial.
Family homes.
Pretty much all of them. You know, especially like custom homes come in, that lot that they're building on was already approved. That subdivision map was already approved. Now they're just building a single-family home. They just come in.
Even though it was approved 30 years ago,
Even though
still,
approved
they have
30 years
rights, they
ago.
have
Yes.
entitlements.
Yes.
That is their
You
entitlement.
can't come and
for
say, well,
that
30
property.
years has passed, we gotta look at it again. I mean,
Yeah.
that's state law.
Right.
People don't understand that, but anyway.
So, again, you know, even so with a single family home, we're going to go back when we're reviewing that and look at, well, what were the conditions that were approved, you know, for that subdivision, and what are our requirements? What are the setbacks? We make sure that single family home still meets all of our requirements. But it doesn't have to go before any hearing body to get approval. Now, again, going back to Gateway, so the construction of the warehouses are ministerial. Well, why is that? Because there was a previous map approved, and it was, I can't recall the exact year, but it was many, many years ago that they subdivided those parcels. That went through public hearing process. These lots are zoned research and development. Again, going back to our zoning code, if you look under research and development, it describes what is permitted, what it requires a conditional use permit, what is not allowed. And so warehouses are a permitted use on lots that have R&D zoning. And so they don't require any further discretionary review or approval. It just is, if they come in and they submit plans to building, and those buildings meet all of our, you know, setbacks, and they're, you know, doing
Bays, encroachments, driveway aprons, all our standards for engineering and for planning. As long as they check all those boxes, and we make sure that they check all those boxes, then yes, that is their right. And as Supervisor Heidel said, whether it was approved 30 years ago or, you know, 30 days ago, that is their right for entitlement of that property under those circumstances.
What if they ask for exceptions? Is it still ministerial?
It depends on what that exception is. So if they came in and they said, well, you know, I'm trying to think of an exception that
Variance to
we,
a setback, right?
Yeah,
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Setback requirement is 30 feet from the street. I need to make it 25. Can you do
Yeah,
that?
exactly.
Those are the minor kind of changes in terms of setbacks, which are generally considered de minimis.
right.
As long as it doesn't conflict with line of sight, vegetation, fire safety. I mean, a lot of different things go into that, but usually something like that is pretty simple to assess.
But if they build something and they say, you know, instead of warehouse, I'm going to do,
Manufacturing, industrial.
right, yeah, right.
They're
or-
gonna be like, oh, no, yeah.
I'm gonna do a cement plant, you know,
Yeah,
batch
that's not
plant.
flying. No.
That doesn't work. So that requires going back. If they really want to do that, they have to kind of start all over again
Yeah.
and get a discretionary permit to allow. In that case, they'd probably have to rezone it, request a rezone to allow for that use.
There's a lot of misnomer associated with R&D. You really need to look at the zoning ordinance to look at the allowed uses under R&D. Because people think, well, it's a little research facility and a lab and some parking lot stuff. That's not the way the county, El Dorado County, has defined R&D zoning. The allowed uses are incredible. Open space, the allowed uses are incredible. Just to call it open space, you think, well, nothing can be there. That's not true. Recreational facilities can be there, high intensity, low intensity. So it all gets into what's in the definition of those tables in terms of what's allowable, what requires conditional use permit. There was a lot of thought put into it, but I have some ideas on ways we could change it to make it more interpretable the next go around.
And that's why he's talking about redoing, when we redo this, which is the general plan, those specifications, those details need to be ironed out so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and pretty much if you do a general plan update, you're almost automatically going to have to do a zoning code update as
Yeah.
well, so they're compliant. So that's, you know, kind of the difference between discretionary and ministerial project, and we process both in planning and building all day, every day. And
Could you
you know,
comment on the state's influence on ministerial SB 330, for instance? That's the
Yeah.
project that's being discussed
So-
right now. Bass Lake
So the
Apartments.
state is, as you well know, they're very much about affordable housing. And so they are passing laws every year that make it more of a ministerial process for affordable housing. In fact, there are several laws now that make it a ministerial project if they meet certain requirements. So that is challenging for us. On top of that, and I'll talk about this on the next slide, you know, they restrict timeframes or make them shorter timeframes for reviewing. But we are definitely seeing slowly that the state is eroding our land use control. We do not have nearly as much say as we used to have years ago, as you know, particularly when it comes to housing. So let me go on then to the next slide, and I'm talking about some of the time.
Really quick, I just would like to know what that state law is, because I've worked on state planning, and state planning does have recommendations for the county.
SB 35, look at SB 330. There's
SB 9.
SB 9.
So it's
So these are
state,
states.
state law.
State law always overrides what's in our ordinance.
Yeah. No.
So let me say this too. So what happens if we just thumb our nose at the state and say, you know what? I get that this is an affordable housing application and I'm supposed to process this ministerially. Bad things happen. So the Attorney General will sue, and here's the worst part. They will take away our ability to do any land use control. They will take over, the state will come in and actually take over land use for that jurisdiction and make the decisions. And I can tell you, they will be much more lenient than we ever are. City of Folsom, years ago.
Can you give El Dorado County, give us an example? Never seen that.
El Dorado County, that has not happened.
With the state,
Hasn't happened yet.
very commonly, the county would say, we have to do this because the states, and I'm sitting there with planners, and they're like, this.
It is my duty as
not
a
gonna-
public servant to make sure I'm doing everything I can so that the county does not get sued, because it is not cheap.
Keep this out of litigation, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I can
No,
send you.
No, that is absolutely.
know you're-
not. That,
mean, I want to see.
and that's much more in-depth, conversation, Tara, that we can have, and if you'd like, Karen and I would love to share with you, a lot more case study, because Karen and I speak to county council on a regular basis, and we were just in a conference call several months ago, speaking exactly on that topic. And county council specifically forbid us to go deviate from state standards. So I'd be glad to share that with you emphatically, because Karen and I, like I said, we just had that conversation with county council. I have no problem. It's more weeds, more weeds.
I have stuff I want to show you. And
Sure,
like,
sure.
Okay.
Without a doubt.
Real quickly, time constraints. So planning has all kinds of requirements for getting stuff done in a certain amount of time. And again, back to Supervisor Heidal's point, this is getting more restrictive, more restrictive. So when we get an application in, we have to see if it is complete or not, and let the applicant know within 30 days if it's not complete. one of the newer ones from SB 330 is we're prohibited now from conducting more than 5 public hearings for housing projects. That includes continued hearings. So, you know, if I go to the Planning Commission and they decide to continue it over the course of 3 meetings, and, you know, then I go to the board, they're really limited. You can, if it goes past 5, you're done, it's approved. So we have, yeah, that's the state
That's what
for
a
you.
ministerial demand is from the state.
So we also have more requirements now related to tribal consultation. And so in this county, that's obviously a thing. And so there's time constraints around that, around notification to the tribes. With an environmental impact report, the review, we're required to, at minimum, have 45-day review. El Dorado County almost always does 60 days. The state says don't go more than 60 days. So we've got kind of a pretty narrow window. There are some exceptions, but not many. We must approve or deny a housing or mixed use project within 90 days after the EIR is certified, or 60 days if almost half, 49% were affordable units. These are new laws that were passed in the past few years. Time constraints also for getting out public hearing notices, notice of preparation of EIRs, and then of course it takes time to gather all this information that we've talked about and put it in a staff report and get it on an agenda. There's also agenda noticing requirements. And again, this county, most of the times it's 72 hours. El Dorado County, most jurisdictions, they put out an agenda more than 72 hours. Usually a week is pretty standard. In our case, Planning Commission, it's 2 weeks ahead of time. And related to time constraints, I know there's been talk about expediting projects. We do not have an expedited project, and you got a developer sitting here that probably wishes we did, but he can tell you firsthand, we do not have any checkbox on the application for expediting. No matter how much money they pay us, we go at the same pace, and it's really first come, first serve for projects. Now, every project's different, unique, has different pace. So they may all come in at the same time and end up years apart for approvals, or they may be submitted years apart and end up all on the same track. And that's kind of what we have here in El Dorado Hills right now. We've had several projects. Some were submitted a year ago, some were submitted 3 years ago, some were submitted 10 years ago. They all just happen to be converging right now. So you've got Creekside, Marble Valley, Lime Rock, Generations, Town and Country, all of them kind of hitting at the same time. And that's just sort of the odd thing that happened. I don't think it's ever, yeah.
It just happens to be sometimes.
Well, sometimes it's driven by the economy. When people
Sometimes
start
they
to
are.
see
It
the
is.
financing available to move a project forward, right?
It is, and that's part of it. So I know people have asked, like, well, why are there so many home projects when interest
not
rates
us.
are so high? Yeah, we don't control that. But I'll tell you, they're getting prepared. The developers, the folks that want to build here, they love this county. They believe in this county. They know they can sell their product here when the market turns. So all this that they're doing, they're getting prepared for that next market cycle.
Have that entitlement ready for when the
Ready to go,
market's-
ready
yeah,
to build, yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so next slide, just how do you stay informed and get involved? I cannot emphasize enough going to it's called Projects in Your Area. And I don't know, would that link work if you clicked on it, go to the internet, that Engage El Dorado?
I don't know if it'll work on this share. I'll probably open up in a browser the other
Both
screen.
graphical and then itemized by project. So
We have
it's
it,
easy
we have it
to
linked
find
at,
things.
on the APAC website.
Okay, so this is what we are now driving all of our project information to for these larger projects. And it's got everything you would need to know or want to know about the project. We have all the environmental documents. We have a site plan. We have a email directly to the project planner. We have timelines. We have the map showing where it is. And if there ever is something, if you're looking on there and you know there's a document that's not showing up, just send an email to whoever is listed as a project planner and they'll make sure they get it on there. So very comprehensive information, far better than trying to find stuff and track it. This is what we're using, and I'd encourage everybody to go there. But there are other ways. So there's also still on the county email subscriptions. You can go on and check mark what you want to get updates on. So for example, you can get all the planning commission agendas emailed directly to you, or all the, anytime we have just kind of general land use and development services updates. There's stuff for DOT for road projects and road alerts that you can sign up for. And then of course, getting involved in the community meetings. We have, including tomorrow night, one for generations, and these planning staff has done this for a while, or in years past. We just haven't had these large projects. But when we have a project with an EIR, there's a point in time, that 45, 60 days I talked about, where folks can comment on that EIR. We like to have a meeting and take comment in at that time, and just sort of explain, here's what the environmental process is. Just one more touch point that we have with the community to help get feedback and hear your thoughts and concerns. We've done one for Marlboro Valley and Lime Rock already. The one tomorrow night is for generations. And so Zoom is available as well. So if you can't be there in person, you can participate via Zoom. If you go to projects in your area and find generations, click on that, you will see all the information to get you to this meeting.
Many people have asked about that tomorrow night, and I'm really confused about that. Is it a plan commission meeting? Because
It is not. It is just a community meeting, just staff out there getting comments from the
okay,
community.
the staff is actually asking for formal input from the community on an informal meeting with the planning commission.
We have always, anytime we have an environmental impact report, there is always a comment period prior to it going to a public hearing. So this is just us being out in the community saying, hey, now's the time. This is the public comment period for this environmental impact report.
You don't have to do it that night. We're just saying, hey, giving a brief description of the project, what's going on, and then letting people know. So if you have concerns, you have X many amount of days, bring them to us within that.
And I get it. And Karen, here's the thing. It was very little, there's very little notice. It's informal. I think it's outrageous that we've got a large project that is controversial because it's a community region that has to meet the largest incompatibility of zoning and general plan designation. It's a very, very controversial project. It's a very important project. There is a lot of infrastructure going to that project site, utilities as well as infrastructure for Green Valley and other areas. So what my concern is that there's much confusion that it said it's going to be at the planning commission, in the planning commission room, in Placerville, but it's informal, and they're taking public comment on the project, but it's informal. It's an informal meeting. There's only 2 planning commissioners there. How does that,
It's not a planning commission meeting, so it's just one more step.
And we're not required to do that.
Yeah.
We can just send out.
This is an attempt at more outreach than what the state law requires as a minimum.
and I'm all for outreach as long as it should be formal outreach.
You can't inform
Public,
everybody every day.
but it should be formal outreach. We should not be having informal outreach.
There's no such thing as formal and informal outreach on.
Formal is where you notice the public.
Let me finish. There's no such thing as formal, informal outreach when it comes to public comment on an EIR.
Yeah.
There is just a public comment period.
Well,
The formal part is when we gather all that information from
notice the public, and we have processes.
Yes.
We notice the public 500 feet with from the edge of the property,
Yes.
and every meeting is noticed. This is not being officially noticed.
It is not,
It's being
it's
skipped.
not an official meeting.
That's what came tonight. I really want to hit that really hard, because I'm seeing this as a skip of the process of the
Absolutely
project.
not. To Supervisor Heidel's point, we're working very hard to outreach more than required.
500 feet of the project get noticed officially in a letter.
From a state requirement, I think we actually do 1,000 feet, so.
Was it done on the planning commission meeting tomorrow? But it's not a planning commission meeting.
But there was noticing, there was noticing for that as well. Yeah.
Requesting public comment. Or we're asking for public comment on a very important project.
Presentation and ask questions.
Yes.
Okay, I'm
Specific to the environmental document.
hearing that this is not a planning commission meeting, but you're requiring, I mean, you're asking for public comment.
Yes. This has always been done on environmental.
Been done. It's
reports.
done in a formal.
No, that is not correct.
Process would happen in the
Process.
planning commission meeting.
Yeah.
That's
So
where it
yeah,
becomes formal.
Yes, that's where it becomes formal, is when we have a planning commission meeting, and that,
That is
yes, that is a
agendized,
formal,
publicized.
that is
Here's
separate.
why,
That's another
and here's why I am
confusion.
so, it's so important, because even at the DEIR level, it's always a formal process. It should be a formal process.
There's a public comment period for any draft environmental impact report. We take those comments, and then our environmental consultant actually answers any concerns that are brought up. And that all becomes part of the record in the final environmental impact report. The final environmental impact report is what goes to planning commission.
Yes, yes.
Hey, John, can I interject here real quick? Because I know we're having a lot of back and forth on stuff that doesn't seem to be
Please.
getting to the presentation. But
Please.
just to kind of table some of these things, we're not going to litigate all the different issues. It's not possible during this meeting. But I spend too much time litigating in my career. So setting some of this stuff aside, I think the issue that she's trying to get to in the public comment is just whether or not these comments that are going to be made at the meeting tomorrow, whether or not they're going to be part of the official record. Because we all know if they're part of the official record, it becomes subject to the appeal. And if you don't make it part of the official record, it doesn't become subject to the appeal. But we can move on from there. But just
Thank you.
I would like to get back to something else, which is there was a lot of statements made in the presentation about what the state does and what the state is going to do. And it's almost instilling some fear. Now, I actually have to review a lot of that legislation, and I litigate a lot of that legislation. And I would hope that the county would take a different approach and not necessarily take what the state says to be constitutional and the gospel going forward. I think there's, like you said in the past, there's some requirements that have to be met. And for a lot of the residential development, the requirement is that you have to be in an urban center or you have to be in a high density center. And El Dorado County doesn't meet some of these requirements. So I'm hoping that maybe some of the takeaway you can bring back to the county council is that maybe some of the county residents want you to take a deeper dive into some of this legislation and actually see if it's legislation that should stand and guide how we develop this county.
That is done. In terms of the eligibility of the applicant, they have to file an application for an SB 35. Do they meet the requiremements? And county council is integral in reviewing that. And saying,
I'm not.
Yes, they do.
We have actually turned
John,
down
I'm not saying that,
applications.
and I'm saying this is on a 20,000 foot level. I'm just saying some of the feedback that I had just sitting there listening to how the presentation was given and how the description was of what the state can do and what the state is doing, I don't find necessarily to be accurate. And so I was hoping that just giving that feedback, having listened to that presentation, there are things that we can do at the county level. There are things, like you were saying, in redoing the general plan, in redoing the zoning. I totally agree, because there aren't great definitions. There's too much discretionary power in the zoning code as it stands. So I am optimistic that the county will do that, because I think the pushback you're getting in all these comments is that there's residents here that want their voice heard in keeping El Dorado County more consistent with the rural developments that have gone on thus far. So that being said, and I hope we can kind of move on from all of this and keep going in your presentation.
I agree, Brooke. And one thing I do want to strictly emphasize, and you guys might have missed it, Karen just said it right now, is we have rejected several projects. They have come in through our offices that said, oh, we meet the SB 35 requirements. And we've said, no, you don't. No way in heck do you meet those requirements. And we've rejected many of projects that say we're ministerial and that we are entitled to property rights. And Karen and I have rejected those projects. So yes, and that's the message that I do want to get, because you guys don't know about those, because that happens at staff level. Sometimes they don't even know of the fact, except for then those project applicants complain to them and they say, we're not doing them, we're doing them a disservice. But Karen and I have rejected multiple projects that have come through our offices that don't meet our requirements, and we nitpick it because we know we can. And so then, and that's what I wanted to just emphasize, that yes, we have rejected projects.
But study what happened in Folsom. We don't want to become Folsom,
No.
okay?
Yeah, Karen,
Case in point.
Yes, next slide, just real quickly. How do planning and Department of Transportation work together, both on a project-specific basis and also looking kind of long-range projects as well? So again, with a specific project, they're involved. If there's a pre-application, they're involved. When we get to technical advisory committee and reviewing the application submitted, they're involved. Environmental review, they're involved. Development agreements, conditions of approval. And then again, when it comes back through and we're actually reviewing plans to make sure it meets all the requirements, DOT's involved. On the long range side of things, DOT, we look at our general plan. We do both an annual review and a 5-year review. The 5-year is a more comprehensive review. DOT's involved with that, with their CIP update. They actually have to go to Planning Commission when they update their CIP, and so we work together on that. We have regular meetings with El Dorado County Transit and SACOG talking about the land use and transportation and how those work together. And then just Raphael and I and our staff, we just have regular communication all the time. There is a reason why we're in the same building, because we are using those stairs all the time, back and forth, talking to each other in our meetings. So I just want to cover that. So that's really it for my piece. I'm going to turn it over to Raphael now.
So
You want to wait till you finish yours to take more questions, or you want?
the things I have are specifics. Okay, go ahead.
You have the,
Quick question, yeah.
you have a mic?
Oh, no, quick question. First of all, thank you, Karen, for being here and putting together the presentation for your staff. It's really appreciated, and we're glad you're here. A couple things on the projects. One, I have noticed on some of the TAC reviews, when we get some of the documentation, there's a lot of agencies and or groups that don't necessarily
A
respond.
little louder so we can hear you up here. It's hard to hear you.
Sorry, that's why I stood up too. I'll try to project more too.
Thank you.
It would be really helpful if there was a follow-up to ensure that all of the different groups that get the application actually are responding to it somehow, because I think that we end up seeing some of the projects and then there's no input and we're like, why did you guys not input? So I know it's not necessarily planning, but it's some of the groups that the information goes out to for the application as part of the TAC review. It would be nice to have like a checkbox, like, why aren't you responding to these things? Because those are important, right?
I think they're required to respond, right? It's just
They're not required to, and I would tell you, our staff actually spends a lot of time following up.
Yeah.
You know, I won't name names, but we're sitting in their building. Hey, fire district, do you have any comments on this project?
Send us a letter, please.
We know you care, so please give us your comments.
Right. So maybe then we as the public, when we see that they didn't respond, maybe we can apply some pressure and say, you guys really need to start responding. This is
your job in support of us, right? So we can take a look at that too. Some of the meetings that are done by the planning department, I've noticed that unless it's in front of the planning commission or the board of supervisors, those two groups, they publish public comment. But when there's meeting, and I'll give you an example because the safety element, the update that was done, I sent in a written request. It wasn't published anywhere. And in fact, forgotten when it was presented to the planning commission, and I made a correction. So if there's recorded meetings as part of the things that you do and coordinate, which are super helpful, if there's recorded meetings, having those available for other people, it's a information sharing opportunity, right? Having public comment available for that is also helpful. So something to consider if you don't mind, please. Knowing the schedules and calendars for other agencies when setting up review meetings. The great example was the one for Generations tomorrow, which is actually the same night as our El Dorado Hills CSD meeting. And then also the fact that it's a El Dorado Hills project, but it's being held up in Placerville. So something to consider, if you don't mind. Creating a clear checklist of items reviewed by planning staff for decision-making on the recommendation for projects to show consistency in decision-making, and publishing it in all forums to reflect the status for how decisions were made. So then as everything moves forward, when all of the questions start coming up, you have support for your organization saying, this is what we went through. This is why we made the decisions that we did. And it all aligns. I actually did bring that up in the most recent planning commission. And yes, I know that there are some points in the policies documents, but this is more, right? It's showing what you guys look at, how you determine your routing, making sure that it's consistent in how across your organization people are doing things. I think someone said earlier, creating a workflow, some form of a visual for the projects would be helpful. The presentation was good. Some of us have different levels of understanding for stuff, but having a visual workflow would be great. And then finally, the like open house forum EIR things. I went to the most recent, the one for Marble Valley up in Cameron Park. There were a lot of really frustrated people there because they want to hear what other people think on it. I think that if it's going to be done that way, try to have another forum where the public can actually speak in it. Because for some people, they want to listen to what other people have to say and they learn from it. So maybe it's something said already, they know it's covered. I think it introduces an opportunity to help the public feel like they can really be informed, rather than saying, if your comment's not about the EIR, which maybe they don't understand anything about, then it's not appropriate for this forum. And then consider the main concerns from people are public infrastructure cost, water, traffic and roads, and fire safety. Those are the things that consistently come up all the time. And to the costs associated with things, there are costs for us. EID is a great example. When we have to extend water lines to areas that didn't originally have water lines in the general plan, that costs us, and that ends up getting our rates raised, which is what just happened a little while ago. So just a number of things to consider, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Is your question regarding planning? Okay. Do you have a microphone?
On the positive side, congratulations on your website with project information. It's very good. And secondly, I do appreciate your discharging of your duties in a rather thankless task of the planning. That said, however, my concern is really on what would at this point be long-term planning, and specifically to the water. I've just finished a study that accompanied the comments to Marble Valley but I think it's a subject that I'd like to bring up here. There are 17,000 units at this point, residential units in the El Dorado Hills area in the planning. They're undergoing the CEQA. This is just El Dorado. I took all EID's numbers. I reviewed them, spreadsheets on them, and took the very same information to try and discern what the share of that water would be on El Dorado Hills area. And I came up with a deficit. And it's not like the proponents of Marble Valley and anybody else might say. I could be wrong. I have it is formulated as a hypothesis, but I just want to bring that up. On your information, you put SACOG, all the other entities, but you haven't put EID. And we don't even know. I know because I've done some work on this, but it's not being published or not being looked at even by EID, because they say, we've got water. Yes, they do. From a county-wide basis, they have water. And from a county-wide basis, it can satisfy the projected demand, and I have no problem with their projections. But then when you disseminate that information, which has not been done, you have a deficit in El Dorado County. That's my information, and I'll be glad to give you the information has been sent to the county as part of the comments. But I really sometimes wonder where on earth we are when we plan in long term, and maybe this is something that Supervisor Heidel says, and it's time to do it under the general plan, because it's not the same to say there's water up, I don't know, wherever it is, up the hill or down the hill or whatever. And then when you go through the EID pipes, where they go, and that there is no way you can tell whether one area has water and the other one does not. So please do take a look at that in your planning process. Thank you very much.
And I'm take a point of privilege and jump in. So Alistair shared that with us, and Alistair has a long history in land development, project entitlements, not just here in El Dorado County, but everywhere. And this is something we've talked about quite a bit that he's had a concern about for a long time. And he did a lot of work, and we tried to include that data in a manner, it's PDFs, right? It's kind of hard to share the spreadsheet when we make the public comments, but they're available. And we're trying to figure out an approach to how we can engage EID, saying, hey, come and look at this and, clarify for us. Okay, you did. Yeah.
Alistair, please forward at the El Dorado County Water Agency. They are supposed to be looking at all the water demands. EID is just one water purveyor within El Dorado County, right? I can forward you the contact information. Right.
That Marble Valley sites.
Yep.
So that's common.
Right.
But I guess I understand the water agency, but anyway, I've said enough.
Because they're trying to acquire more water all the time, right? So, and some of it looks very prospective, but that's projecting into the future, which we shouldn't be doing today.
If you haven't had a chance to read Alistair's
I have.
report, you can find it on the APAC response to Marble Valley. It's about 25 pages long. It is very detailed. It took me a couple hours to read it, and then I had to read it a second time to understand it, or try to understand it. But it's very detailed, and it's well worth your time and investment to read it and get a better understanding of the issues. Thank you.
And it's shared on the APAC website as well. Yeah. Right now, it's under the Marble Valley comments that we put on the Marble Valley page. But if you want, we'll be putting it someplace by itself, so it's comprehensive. I'm trying to look at maybe doing converting it to a Google Doc, so the actual spreadsheet where it can't be edited, so we can share. So people want to scroll through. You know, there are spreadsheet wizards who would like to look at it. So we'll find a methodology so we can share it to make it protected, but also available. Oh yeah, we submitted it with our comments on the draft. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a spreadsheet. We convert it to a PDF for the public comment. But yeah, we're looking at how we could do it in a shared manner. Yes. Okay. So
I just have a big question on planning code. Sorry, sorry. So and I've asked by a lot of lists. I think they can't even answer it. Is there a location in our a county website that shows the processes? You know how you were identifying ministerial, discretionary when it goes to the ZOA, zoning ordinance. I mean, zoning administrator. Do we have a clear identification of that on our website? Because I think a lot of people are, you know, like with down here in the business park gateway, really, they didn't know where that came out of blue. I mean, they didn't know about minister. I didn't. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and that caught me off guard. So, is there some place on the website?
There's nothing right now, but I will tell you that's the kind of thing we're working on. I actually have a staff person that is focused on process improvements and making materials just like that to make it easier for people to understand, or, you know, have some resources to understand our processes. So I don't have a timeline, but, you know, within the next year, we'll, I mean, sooner than that, but we'll start adding information and having more information on our website that explains some of those things.
But one thing I do want to tell you is, because I get this question a lot from some residents up off of Silva Valley, on different locations, that said, yeah, my real estate agent told me that was going to be open land, that we were going to enjoy it. And I'm sorry, if there is bare open land in El Dorado County, it's zoned for something. And I can tell you, it's probably not a park. It's probably either R&D or residential or commercial or retail. It just, the applicant hasn't moved forward yet. And at any given point, if they meet all the criterias that are within the ministerial category for that parcel, that yes, they can proceed with their project. So it does do you good to go to Karen's website, because there is a zoning map. I think it's in that, or
the assessor's website, the GIS.
Which one is it, Zach? The GIS.
The GIS,
website,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
.net.
.net.
If you go to .net, it will tell you what, if you see an open parcel, if you click on it, it'll tell you what that parcel is zoned for. And so then you can have an idea of, oh, wait a minute, that's, I'm residential, that's R&D. You know, I better look into this, what kind of R&D is, and you're more than welcome to then contact planning or transportation and find out more. Yes, do you have a question?
Rafael, my question to you is that gateway project, and I'm just coming into this whole thing here because I've never been involved, but
yeah,
I feel it's necessary that all residents get involved because we need to protect ourselves.
Great.
And we're appreciative of all the hard work you guys are doing. But that gateway project, it was rejected by the residents of El Dorado Hills, right?
No.
The first time it came around.
No, you're talking about a different project.
Oh, it's a different project? No, I'm talking about where the warehouses are.
That was project.
That was the Amazon project, right?
Yeah, this is totally different.
Totally different, my bad.
No worries. No worries. And so then along those lines, I do want to emphasize what Karen mentioned, is that whether ministerial or discretionary, DOT is alongside with Karen reviewing all those applications. And as I've stated earlier, We have rejected applications before, and there'll probably be more down the line. But at each one, we make sure, because I gotta tell you, Karen and I hate getting hate mail. We don't like having to answer questions as to, well, what the hell are you guys doing? Who's in control at the wheel? Yeah, it's Karen and I. And so we want to make sure that if we're doing something, that we are doing it to the best of our ability or to the best of our staff's ability. Because if we don't, yeah, it's going to be Karen and I who are going to be here to answer to all of you. And so then I appreciate Tara as much as something like, oh, she kills me, because she's asking the tough questions that, yeah, some of you might not have thought about that I need to answer, and then give her the proof. She is doing the trust but verify, and I'll give her the information so that she can verify. So that along those lines, with that said, that one project, which is the ministerial part of Gateway, when it came in, they basically gave us the data. We started looking at it, and then sure enough, I was talking to some Four Seasons residents, some Heritage residents, and they were saying, hey, dude, are you aware of what's going on with John Adams? I'm like, well, yeah, there's a school. And so then there's ministerial, there's discretionary, ministerial, and then there's the state of California green ticket to do whatever the hell you want in a school. So essentially, the state of California has carte blanche. When they want to allow a school to come in, we are forced to do this, which is why, I don't know who was the mental midget who put 4 schools on Silver Valley, for crying out loud, really? OMG, but it is what it is. Now, the good news is the county has got and that is staff as well as supervisors have got a great relationship now with EDCO, and any project that they foresee coming in, they are going to let us know, and we are going to be planning wherever that location would be and what the parameters of it will be. But now charter schools are a different story. They are almost their own other little world. And so then when we saw the numbers for Gateway, and we recognize the fact that we've got additional numbers here that we are kind of red flagging us. That's when I got with Zach and Adam, and we said, you know what, we need to take a look at this. And so sure enough, similar to Karen, the Department of Transportation is required to once a year look at our capital improvements project, as well as our traffic volumes and our circulation. Every 4 to 5 years, we are required to reanalyze our model and make sure that it is falling in line. So projects can come in over here, over there, over here, and then we assume that based off of the study they gave us, that it should be operating correctly, but we don't take that verbatim. We then take their numbers, we take our volumes, we input it into our model, and then we go, good, this is checking, this is checking, this is checking. Well, sure enough, when Gateway came in, and then we started checking those numbers with the volumes on Golden Foothill, as well as on Latrobe, we started seeing some numbers, as well as I do want to thank some of the participants, such as Bill Jamaica, George Steed, and Bob Williams, who also was kind of giving me some fair warning, similar to Brooke, because that's when me and my staff, we are keeping our sensors more open to locations that we are hearing issues with. So then sure enough, I had Zach and Adam look into it, and that's where I'm going to transition now over to my staff. Zach is going to give you a PowerPoint presentation very quickly to go over why is it that the intersection of Robert J. Matthews and Golden Foothill popped up as needing additional mitigation, and why it didn't before. That the intersection of Robert J. Matthews and Golden Foothill popped up as needing
How about if I do this?
additional mitigation.
I was trying to get the sound for you. I got some sound. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay, so Whew, that was weird. And so then with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Zach so he can explain some of that data for you. So thank you very much, Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Raphael. So Zach Oates, I'm a senior civil engineer with DOT at El Dorado County. And John, we can go to the next slide there. But as Raphael mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about.
You know what? I think it'd be best if you take that and go to the podium so you can.
For sure.
We have the microphone out. We did.
There's one up there, I think.
Yeah, there's a microphone. I think it's easier to use that, the microphone up there, Zach.
I'll try and talk loud here.
I can hear you in stereo too, then.
Very good. All right, so yeah, as Raphael mentioned, and Karen also, we went to the Planning Commission this year, as we do every year for our annual update with the CIP program. And the Planning Commission's main function there is to make sure that any changes we're making to the CIP are still consistent with the general plan. And they have to make that finding before we go to the board for approval. And one of the new projects that we were proposing this year was the Robert J. Matthews Parkway at Golden Foothill Parkway roundabout, essentially an intersection improvement project. And as Raphael mentioned, we started noticing in several of the traffic studies that were coming in for projects in the business park area, the Latrobe corridor area, that we started to see the traffic levels increasing at that intersection in the business park and the level of service being degraded, really approaching failing levels, particularly in the afternoon school let out time, school pickup time. So what we've heard repeatedly from the Planning Commission and the board and members of the public is, how did we determine that a roundabout was the appropriate solution as opposed to a traffic signal, or I'm sure there are some other creative solutions we could come up with. So what we went ahead and did was put together some preliminary models. I do want to stress that these are not final designs. They are preliminary, but they do a good job of showing how each of the alternatives solve issues, but present some perhaps other minor issues as well. So I'm going to start by going over some of our traffic signal warrants. If we could go to that next slide, John. And so Raphael touched on this a little earlier, but essentially, in order for us to be able to justify installing a traffic signal, we have to comply with the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, what we call the MUTCD. And essentially, there are 9 separate warrants or criteria categories that we can use to justify the installation of a traffic signal. Typically in El Dorado County, it's one of the first 3, which is either based on 8-hour vehicular traffic volumes, 4-hour traffic volumes, or if the peak hour, if the busiest 1 hour in any day has enough traffic, then that can also be used to justify a traffic signal. The MUTCD does point out that just because a single warrant is met does not necessarily mean that a traffic signal is required. And they specifically go on to say that for local streets and highways, that we should also take a look at whether or not a roundabout is a viable solution, and we can go forward with that. All right, next slide. So what these 2 graphs show on the left there, that is the 4-hour peak, or the 4-hour vehicular volume warrant number 2, and those red dots indicate the 4 busiest hours in a 24-hour period on an average travel day. And when we say average travel day, we're typically looking at a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday during school, not summer vacation when people are out of town and that kind of thing. So essentially, what these graphs show is any of the red dots above the line, they satisfy the warrants. They meet the volume criteria, and the MUTCD says, okay, based on those traffic volumes, a traffic signal would be warranted at that location. We can, let's see.
Well,
so,
hold on.
Yep.
Before you move out of this slide, I want to point out that this is how we justify signals anywhere in El Dorado County. So you can pay him $1,000 under the table, and it's not going to get you a signal. It's going to get him to get me to look at it, and I'll tell him what.
You just set a starting price, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe let's not. So.
But it's this chart right here that we utilize. Now, To Brooke's point, there is also a metrics for number of accidents. And that also constitutes whether it will meet the warrant. So after today's meeting, I will be asking, it's a different group of mine that does this analysis to see if your intersection then now meets that criteria. But it is, we are, when it comes to anything having to do with mitigation, there are no politics that are played. We base all our decision on metrics given to us by the state of California. So Zach, go ahead.
Yep, well said. So when we were considering, once we saw that we met the warrants, one thing we looked at was the actual geometry of that intersection, taking into the context of the Latrobe, Golden Foothill, Clubview intersection, and specifically how close those two intersections are together. I think from the crosswalk across Golden Foothill to what you might consider the beginning of the intersection at Robert J. Matthews, I want to say it's less than 300 feet. It's about 285, 290 feet. So there's not a lot of space there. Ideally, for traffic signals, you don't want to get them closer than 750, 800 feet. Obviously, there's many cases where they're much narrower or where the spacing is much narrower, and you can do things to coordinate signals, and there's a lot that goes into that. But given that this intersection is off of the main line of Latrobe Road where the majority of traffic is going, trying to synchronize those signals would make things a lot better at Robert J. Matthews. It would make things a whole lot worse on Latrobe. So what we did is we went ahead and put together these preliminary models that I was talking about. We can go to the next slide there, John. And so this is a little video simulation that we put together of the existing conditions. So this is, you can see Latrobe going north-south there on the right-hand side of the screen. That's Clubview going off the right side, Golden Foothill Parkway going to the west, to the left, and then Robert J. Matthews coming in at the bottom there. And so, yeah, go ahead and hit play. Thank you. And this is showing basically the side street stop control that we have off Robert J. Matthews. And the failing movement here, I want you to keep an eye on all the traffic that's stacking up there on Robert J. Matthews. It takes one car that's waiting to turn left. And again, this is traffic volumes and counts that were collected during school hours between approximately 2 and 3 o'clock. And it takes one car waiting to turn left there after picking their kid up at John Adams or somebody leaving one of the many businesses there in the business park. And you can quickly see how nobody's moving there on Robert J. Matthews, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with as you've driven through there. So, all right, we can probably skip to the next one there. And so what we did here was add a traffic signal at that intersection. And now the issue becomes, as the westbound traffic on Golden Foothill gets the red light as it is there now, you notice the queue backing up and clogging up traffic on Latrobe. And then it'll clear out a little bit and the traffic will come out of Blackstone there. And then again.
Here, this is where the queue starts to form, is the fact that they have to wait for this light. They stop right there. It backs this up and then it backs into Latrobe. So now our main line is backed up. Not quite. Not quite.
All right, we can go to the next one there, John.
All right.
Yep, go ahead. And so the third one is, again, with our single lane roundabout shown here. And what you'll notice is that the traffic on Golden Foothill Parkway, it does start to back up towards the corner on Latrobe, but you'll notice that those cars are constantly moving. The traffic flows, the traffic on Robert J. Matthews is able to freely enter the circle, go to the left or the right. Occasionally cars on Golden Foothill will have to wait for a car off of Robert J. Matthews to navigate the circle to go west. But essentially that traffic clears out.
Traffic is not here as it was.
Yep. So it'll get close there. And again, I want to stress, this is for the worst of the worst during school hours. For the other 23 hours and 45 minutes of the day, 23 and a half hours of the day, this traffic is going to flow freely around there. And there are some limitations with the software in trying to force things as far as how drivers interact with each other in the software and the yielding and those types of things. So
what I want to emphasize is that because we identified this signal to have a deficiency, meaning it met one of the warrants and there were failing level of services under the existing condition, the county of El Dorado has to then proceed with saying we need to mitigate that. We can't allow an intersection to be failing. We can't allow it to have deficiencies or safety issues. So then we have to do something. So we have two options. We have either a signal or a roundabout. So as Zach said, we're not 100% sold on the roundabout because there are a lot of right-of-way needs that we would have to accommodate for that. And we're not 100% sold on the signal because signals require a lot more maintenance than roundabouts. But we're saying we have to do something. And at some point, we will have discussions with the community regarding what is going to be the best fit for this location. And then when that time comes, we can have discussions and moving forward. But all we're doing right now as part of our CIP is we're saying we need to start collecting money for this project. Whereas before, it did not come to our attention because we weren't aware that John Adams was going to be having that big of an impact. Now, when I say money, I'm not saying you guys, okay? I'm not gonna go around here with a tidings offering. It is the developments that are coming into this area that pay into this. And that is the fair direction, is to make sure that any developments that are coming here, that they are paying for this additional. Now, they're paying for a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Widenings on Latrobe, White Rock, improvements to the interchange. We're just saying we're going to add this one to that list of improvements.
One point, just to,
Can I?
let me just clarify one quick point right there. We are seeing some failing level of service during the school peak hours. During our normal morning, evening peak hours, we're not there yet. But we are starting to see with some of the traffic studies that have been done by other projects in the area that it's getting there. And so like Raphael mentioned.
It's not there yet, yes. Thank you for correcting
So like
me.
Raphael mentioned, that's why we want to get it into the CIP so we can get it into our traffic impact fee program so that when new development projects do come in, every time they pull a building permit, they've got to pay their TIF, their traffic impact fees. And those fees go to pay for these improvements. So like Raphael mentioned, it's the new development that comes in that pays their fees to pay for these improvements, not the businesses that are already there, or the residents that are already there.
Yes, bro.
So along those lines, because in using this with the Saratoga intersection, do you have a process that looks at basically retrocharging developers who build not to the original plan, not to the original approved plan, like Saratoga? So they put in a park, which created an added safety concern for the traffic and for the roadways that were never done in the original studies. So do you include that in part of your analysis, looking at what was originally studied versus what was the as-built, and maybe if there's conditions that warrant another look safety-wise, could the developer, who in Saratoga's case is still on site, have an additional condition where maybe they do pay for some of these mitigation factors at these intersections?
So I'm actually going to put my supervising civil on the spot here and kind of hand this over to him because from my understanding, I do not believe, Brooke, that there is a mechanism to retroactively go back and bill previous developments for deficiencies that are upcoming or are existing. And that is one flaw of the Impact Mitigation Fee Act and the Subdivision Map Act, that it does not allow us. So Adam, can you reiterate?
There's no mechanism that I'm aware of that would allow us to go back and retroactively change a condition of approval or a requirement of a project. Now, if there is legitimately a project that is not in compliance with its planning approval and somehow that got missed through the process, then there would be some mechanism through a legal action to be able to do that. but there would have to be a finding that there was a substantial change from what was originally approved.
Or that they, a major deficiency that they ignored the
Yeah.
conditions. Okay.
And I, in my career, I have been involved with projects that have been litigated after the fact that have had ramifications. But once a final map is approved, it's a state law requirement that they have those entitlements. So if there's something that was nefarious that was done or something that was below board that we didn't know about, then, you know, that's a different thing. But
Okay.
so long as it meets with the planning approval, then there's no mechanism that I'm aware of. A lot of things we do are being umpires and calling balls and strikes, and somebody may have an opinion that that's not in substantial conformance or not correct, or somebody else may think it is. And we could work on those on a case-by-case basis if somebody has specific evidence that something went haywire.
Right. Well,
But short of that, there's not anything I'm aware of.
yeah, the example is, you know, you had a park at an intersection that wasn't studied. So the impact to the intersection, so the lack of a sidewalk, the lack of a route for the children to take compounds the issue of finders at Saratoga, because there is no crosswalk for the kids to access the park at that intersection. And so that's a safety concern. But that was never studied because that park was never supposed to be there. So it wasn't a part of the original traffic analysis for that development to be developed. And it is through it is caused by the way the developer chose to develop the project. And it's now having an effect on the traffic now. So is there anything where you guys can capture that and use that as an additional basis when evaluating or warranting mitigation at intersections, looking at was there compliance, or are there additional factors that were not initially studied that may warrant some evaluation at these locations?
There's a lot of detail that went into the planning of that project, and I can't claim to be an expert at all of it. The one thing I would offer is I'd be more than willing to sit down and meet with somebody that had some specific information. We could delve into it. But I don't have enough details to be able to answer that.
But I can tell you, Brooke, that that although if in the event that, let's say, the park wasn't part of the original study for either the corridor or the intersection, that we look at it now with our current volumes and circulation and speeds and pedestrians, and if it actually meets the metrics, crosses the threshold of needing improvements because of current conditions with the park, then yes, it is our duty to then actually make those improvements. So, but if they don't, then that's when we need to see what else we can do. But that's why I hope to work with my staff as soon as I get back to the office to find out where we're at and then what we need to do to mitigate that location.
Right. And just to bookend that, I can assure you that the original traffic study, having looked at it and reviewed it, the original pathway was there was 2 stops and crosswalks put in on Wilson, because that was going to be the ingress and egress point from our neighborhood into the new parks that were going in Saratoga Estates. Completely removed. It was never supposed to be an access point off of Saratoga. So it was never studied.
I will take a look at it and then get back to you.
Thank you.
My name's Juanita Brand. I live on Flat Circle, same street that Brooke lives on. And I was at the original meetings when Elliot came and talked to the community. We back up to Saratoga Estates. And I don't know, I don't have the name of the man who said it, but he was one of the representatives from Elliot. He said the community park would be within where they built the park that's now only for residents. We were told the community park would be for all El Dorado Hills inside their community and that people could walk into it. And he also said there would be a traffic light at Finders and Saratoga.
Said that?
He said that. And we were just completely lied to. So that's That's
Sorry,
my
I wasn't
input.
there to now hold him to that promise because unfortunately, any of the previous studies that we did with Elliott never included a signal at that location. So that's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. Zach, you want to continue?
Yeah, I think that was just about it. We ran through the roundabout slide. I think our last slide just asked for questions, and I think we're there. So if there's any others.
I have a question. In a place where a lot of people don't stop at stop signs, you think they can handle a roundabout without killing each other?
I have a lot of faith in the people of El Dorado Hills. But that is a question we hear a lot. And the simplest way that I like to describe roundabouts is don't think of it as a circle. Think of it as going to any other intersection where you might yield for somebody else. So if you're on El Dorado Hills Boulevard and you're turning to go up the hill on Serrano Parkway, you've got the fly-off ramp there for northbound traffic, and you've got to yield and wait for them to go. It's the same at a roundabout. If you're in the circle, you have the right of way.
Sorry, I need that, please. Sorry, I've shared my thoughts before on roundabouts. I'll share them again. I actually did, last time I spoke at the Board of Supervisors meeting on this for Raphael's topic. I did recently have to go back out to Arizona, and once again, I saw the roundabouts by my parents' house that had been there for probably about 10 years now. And within a course of 3 days, I saw at least 2 different accidents within the roundabouts. And I saw one person going in circles because they couldn't figure out how to get out. Now those were 2-lane roundabouts, right? So you have the interior, but you don't assume that people are going to yield. And that's probably the biggest thing, is people figuring out when they can safely enter, because what wasn't really shown was, you made point of the left turn coming off of Robert J. Matthews, right, onto Golden Foothill. But that's going to be the problem in the roundabout, because you're going to have somebody start going around, and you're going to have people coming in from Latrobe Road that are just going to want to keep going in their little circle, right? So it is an issue, and it is a learning experience, and I'm not convinced that everybody would adhere to it.
No, you're not wrong. One point to the accidents, in that yes, there will still be accidents. But one thing with roundabouts is everybody entering the circle is slowing down, and those points of conflict that we like to call them are.
That's also an assumption.
Well, the accidents happen when people don't slow down.
Exactly.
But at roundabouts, those points of conflict, people are, it's not a direct T-bone or a head-on. It's more of a glancing blow. And so while yes, there are still accidents, there are. If you look at the data in the studies that have been done, the accidents that happen, the percentages of severe accidents, thank you, and bodily injury and all that are much lower in roundabouts than they are compared at stop signs or signalized intersections.
And you also have the people that decide to drive over the roundabout.
Very few and far between, but they always make the news though. So.
The state of California is helping fund roundabouts. They aren't helping fund any kind of road capacity. There's the primary thing about roundabouts is it forces people to slow down. But it also saves on gas emissions and everything else. Electric cars are exception, I guess. But if you keep moving, it's a whole lot better than sitting there with your car idling. So.
Oh, this gentleman had a question first, and then I'll get back to you.
Will that roundabout accommodate the exit from the Tractor Supply Company and the fast food or the drive-through places that Gateway is going to build there?
So like I mentioned, we haven't finalized the design yet. We have had a preliminary conversation with the Gateway developer to discuss that. The existing driveway that's there is on the very edge of where that roundabout construction would kind of terminate, where we would tie back into the existing road. And so we have had preliminary conversations to see if it might be beneficial for the project, I should say for our county project, to relocate some of that traffic into the circle, as opposed to having another point of conflict immediately after exiting the roundabout. So that's something that will be evaluated further as we get more into the design.
They're constrained by a bit of a wetlands there too, right? Am I remembering that right?
There is a wetland in there, but it's got some.
So you have
flexibility
room?
along the front.
Okay. All right.
Just a quick comment. I don't know if you talk to your colleagues in Folsom because we went to a meeting about their planning within 5 years, I think, to put a entrance onto 50 from Empire Ranch, and they're planning to put a roundabout on there.
More roundabouts. One at each of the major intersections. So it's a
Oh, I
complex
mean,
of roundabouts.
but when we ask them questions, they like, we know nothing about traffic in El Dorado County. You know, the world ends at the county line, so.
It is Caltrans' requirement that we analyze a roundabout as well as a traffic signal at any new traffic control intersection. So, and once again, I want to reiterate that this is not the end all be all, that a roundabout isn't a cookie cutter or a first approach. It is a site specific approach. So we will look at it. If it works best and it is most efficient and effective, then we might go with it. If it's not, then we won't. There are many locations where a roundabout is not the appropriate design for the location. So if this is one of those locations, then we will work with what we can to improve the signal to work better so that it can accommodate the traffic. So.
But going back to zoning, again, it's important to note that John Adams Academy, I think, is a K through 12 school under an R&D zoning.
Yeah.
So who would anticipate all that school traffic within an R&D park with R&D zoning? But it's allowed within our zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
So those are some of the inconsistencies that happen all the time in terms of the uses in that business park.
Yep. Like I said.
But it creates after the fact situations. We were out there looking at that too. Is there a way to help resolve that by another connection to Latrobe Road? And that would be difficult to accomplish, but maybe possible to help offset some of that traffic flow.
Yeah, I think that was all we have.
But I want to compliment you on the traffic modeling, because I've seen a huge improvement in the county in the 7.5 years I've been on the board of our ability to model and project what traffic is. The traffic demand model and all the other arguments, everybody has an opinion about an intersection and what you need to do to fix it, right?
Yep.
But they don't think about it from a different perspective. And what that traffic modeling does is it allows you to not only measure the volumes, but to visually see what the impacts are. Okay, you use this configuration and now it starts stacking up over here to the point it's unacceptable. And that's exactly what you demonstrated to people. This is a science. It's not an opinion-based decision in terms of how we design traffic signalization and intersections these days. It's pretty sophisticated. There's room for error. There always is room for error, right? Garbage in, garbage out, but at least the ability to model that stuff and to look at variants, look at alternatives. What if we did this? What if we did that? That's huge to be able to turn that around in a modeling system as opposed to sitting around the table with a bunch of civil engineers and comparing notes, right? What do you think? Well, I don't know. What do you think? A trade study, something like that is the way it used to be done, right?
Yep.
The modern techniques are great.
I think that's a great point, and Raphael mentioned it earlier, but all of these decisions are information and database. They're not, like you said, we're not throwing darts at the wall to figure something out.
I want to thank both Zach and Adam, because you're victims. They volunteered to be here. And then I also,
His duty pay? I don't know.
we also need to point out that Supervisor Heidel jinxed us last Monday when he said, hey, we got done within 2 hours of community council meeting. And then
That was a challenge, not a jinx.
well, fix was in. But thank you for both being here for a long evening. I appreciate that. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
That is it.
Okay, I had questions for you, but we're not doing that tonight. So
I will mention one other thing that Raphael did. We were out looking at the Saratoga Park today.
Yeah.
To try to figure out if there's something we can do to help accommodate more parking along the roadway, because that parking lot was way undersized when it was designed. And the question is, how did that ever get through our review process and approved? I still don't know the answer to that. But there's only like 6 parking spaces in a park that there's a lot of demand for. So we're trying to look at some, can we make some accommodations?
Hey, John, I can tell you exactly how it got approved. It didn't, because it wasn't going to be a park. And so it never had to go for approval. And then, so then the CSD just came up, okay, here. No, there's no building permit for it. The CSD built it after the fact because that was the only remainder parcel that was left for them. And that's why you had such a crappy design.
Okay, well, I didn't know there was no building permit. And the
There's
CSD doesn't have
no-
the right to build what they want to build.
They put up their plans, and then that was the only thing that they could build on that small parcel.
There's
Yeah.
4
But
building
it's
permits.
all-
Okay, all right, so Brooke, I
It's
think
all after the fact. Yeah, no, that's why I told you, there's no study on it. There's no study on the impact for that park. There's no study on how the kids are supposed to access that park. It's ridiculous. It's one of the most negligent projects I've ever seen.
But what we're dealing with is a reality. It's built, the kids want to use it, so we're trying to accommodate from DOT's perspective. Is there something we can do to allow some more off-street parking without violating the standards we have to work to?
Yeah.
But can you,
Line of sight?
yeah, instead of prioritizing the parking, can you prioritize a sidewalk that gets the kids from our community there? Because if you add the parking there along the street, you're even making it more dangerous for the kids.
Oh, Saratoga.
The kids literally cross a street on our side. They walk through the dirt up the hill on Saratoga. There's no sidewalk for them. And then if they're following the rules, when they exit that park, if they're riding their bikes and go in the bike lane, they go in a crosswalk. There's no crosswalk exit point for them until they get all the way down to El Dorado Hills Boulevard. It's the most dangerous thing I've ever seen.
We discussed is there ability to do that while we were out there looking at it, and the slope that's in there, and the utilities that are in there, the power lines that are in there. It just doesn't look like you can accomplish anything without major costs.
It's major costs, and obviously, no life is worth the sacrifice. But so we are going to see what we can do with what we have right now.
And I'm gonna add a wrinkle to that too. That's an ADA approved, I think, Children's with Needs playground set.
Not all of
So
them.
you have a heightened element of safety that you need to provide at that park.
Got it.
A suspension bridge, a suspension
Yeah, I know,
walkway,
right?
right?
No kidding.
Across the gap.
We're
That's what
getting
you're
there.
talking about.
So once I get through the analysis, I will let you know what we find, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm gonna read real fast because the hour is late. So we're talking about what we had. So we always leave a spot for our transportation and environmental standing committees, and they've been doing a lot of good work, and we're hearing from them. And when I say that every month, but it's ongoing and endless. Got at least one person here in the room. Thank you. And I know that George was online with us. The one thing we do need to share, there's no real update tonight unless George wants to jump in, but I did talk to Bill Jamaica, and he's in Scotland today. So he's not at our meeting, although by now it's probably morning there. So, but the one thing we do want to share is that George has really been driving the environmental standing committee. He has a lot of new responsibilities now as being on the board at Heritage of the HOA, and also for I never get the name right, George, I apologize. The Concerned Citizens Heritage, Concerned Residents Heritage Village, El Dorado Hills. So he's on the board of that, he's leading the board of that nonprofit. So his time is not really conducive to this, although he's always going to be an APAC voting member because it's just like the mafia. Once we get you can't leave. So, but I want to thank George for his work, but we do need to work internally with our committee members to see how we can augment our leadership in that group. They've been doing so much work. We just appreciate the amount that they've volunteered to do. So that's what I wanted to share tonight on that. The next thing is we want to let everybody know that the Village of Marble Valley Specific Plan, the public comment period for the draft EIR ended on July 1st. We submitted our comments on June 30th, late in the evening. And I believe we had some additional things that were submitted Monday morning early. I did not get confirmation on those. I'll have to follow up with planning to see if they actually got it. But we did get those in. And our approach on this was that, this is a big project, and we had 60 days to look at 4,000 pages in the summer when people are traveling. So it was over holidays. So it was a bit difficult. So we reached out community members, not just in El Dorado Hills, because this impacts Cameron Park. So we had a lot of feedback from people in Cameron Park as well. So we did get that done. That said, and then again, of course, here's the Marble Valley project that we've talked about several times. And they were here last month to make their presentation on both Marble Valley and Lime Rock Valley. So the comment period on Lime Rock Valley with 800 homes ends on July 22nd. If you have things you want us to include in our comments, please get it to us. Like I said, our email addresses are on the top of the agenda. Our email address is also on the APAC website. Anything you'd like to contribute, even if it's one thing or you have a question, please, it might help us form a better response when we're providing these comments. But we'd like to have any participation in probably by the 19th or the 20th, so we can start formatting and get the documents ready. So just wanted to remind people of that. And the other item we wanted to include tonight was Generations at Green Valley. Director Gardner spoke about the meeting tonight, and I know there's some confusion because it was noted in the NOA, the notice of availability for the DIR, that this public meeting, public discussion, that's a better way to put it, would be happening. But really, it was kind of hard to see it anyplace else. I checked with planning commissions, go, hey, is there notice someplace else published on the website, or it was hard to find. So we showed it. It's on the APAC website under events. The Zoom link is in there as well. It is in Placerville. It's in the commissioner's hearing room. And this is a discussion, a public discussion, sort of like what happened with Marble Valley Lime Rock when they did their presentation in Cameron Park for that community. The county organized and facilitated that discussion. And then they were with us, I think, the next day or shortly thereafter to have the discussion here in Dorado Hills. So if you're concerned about Green Valley, you have questions, comments, you love it, you hate it, whatever. The nature of this is the environmental impact. So those are the comments you should be providing for that. And again, Generations, we've talked about where it's at. It was previously Dixon Ranch. It's now, instead of 600 plus homes when Dixon Ranch was denied in 2017, it's now 379. There's a lot of concern and a lot of concern in the immediate community right there, but also all over Dorado Hills. 379 single-family residential lots, park, clubhouse, open space lots, landscape lots, road lots, zone change to a much denser development, and general plan amendment for land use map change from low density residential and open space to high density residential and is it public facilities? Is PF? I never remember that. Oh, thank you. Oh, I struggle. It is late. My alarm goes off at 4 a.m. So, but they are the public comment period for this is 45 days, and I think we'd like to ask for 60. I know that people that are looking to review this have asked for 60 more days, and the law is the law, and we're not ever going to litigate anything as a volunteer group. So we probably will submit a document asking for an additional 15 days. But that 45-day public comment review period ends on August 12th. So if you have comments, please, same thing. If you want us to share your comments, please get them into us. And if you work on a project review, you get to be a voting member. So the other aspect of this is that the applicants will be making their presentation to APAC 2 days after the end of the public comment period here at our next meeting on August 14th. And again, the meeting in Placerville is noted here with the Zoom link on there as well. So these will post tomorrow morning. So if you need the Zoom link, it's in multiple places on the APAC website.
And the good news is the DIR for Generations is only 503 pages long as opposed to the one for Marble Valley and Lime Rock, which were close to over 1,000 and with exhibits over 5,000 pages. So it'll be a quicker read, guys.
Town and Country Village is going right after it.
Yes. Well,
thanks, John.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because our other projects, obviously we had a mini update about EDH 52 Costco. Our knowledge before the meeting started was they're still working on their draft environmental impact report. We heard a little bit more on that. Town and Country Village, I've spoken with the applicants. We're moving our September meeting from the 11th to the 4th because I'm out of town that week, she'll be a junior, moving my junior into her college house in San Luis Obispo. So, the only way we could get the meeting in was to have it the first week of September, which is after the holiday, but this applicant's been so engaged with us for many years. We want to make sure that we can continue to have that engagement so that they can get the feedback from us. Creekside Village, still preparing the draft EIR, and they've been very engaged with our standing committees. So we appreciate the work that the WIN group is doing with our standing committees. And again, we talked previously at the Community Council, the Communities for Health and Independence, the AKT proposal, waiting on an application. When it happens, we'll let you know. Carson Creek R&D, we talked a little bit about that tonight. Parcel split, that application still pending under review. And it's not a discretionary. We heard that it would probably be the zoning administrator when it comes back, but it's an opportunity for you to make comments and provide feedback at that time. And Creekside Greens is a one that I saw a few months ago. And anyways, it's a 1.3 acre lot, and they want to divide it into 7 more lots. It's inside, is it Cressley Downs? I never remember the name. Cressley, essentially off of White Rock, behind the El Dorado de Montano Commercial Center. But they want to add 7 to 9 lots. So yeah, so it'll be residential. And so with that, if you want to make public comments and you can't be at our meeting, get them into us at the email address here by 5 p.m. on Monday so we can get them in. And the idea is that if we get them on Monday, we can send them to whoever our guests or the applicants are so they can be ready to answer it as best they can. And with that, our next meeting is August 14th. It's tomorrow in New York, so sorry guys. But thank you everybody for sticking with us tonight. And did you have anything else there?
Yeah, just since we have the planning here, what's the timeline for Marble Valley? What are the next steps? How long do we have for whatever is coming next?
Next steps of Marble Valley, is that what you asked? Yeah, so it'll take some time to work through the comments and prepare the final environmental impact report. And along with that staff report, finalize all the conditions of approval, but essentially the next step will be preparing everything to go to a public hearing.
Those two.
Meeting has been scheduled for August 8th.
Well, that's for a review of the DI draft, right?
Exhibits and Zoom link. Planning Commission meeting can be found, so exhibits and Zoom link. So.
But it's a discussion of the draft. It's not August 8th. They're going to have comments ready for a final?
This says.
I think the meeting in August is
initial draft presentation to the commission.
Yeah, just again, trying to do extra outreach. So it's just overview of the project.
To update the commissioners.
Yeah.
To give them the initial insight, but it's mostly about the draft and sort of the nature of the discussion we had here. So, but to your point, the applicants told me that they intend to have this decided this year by December. So we just finished the draft EIR comments. They're going to have to process the final and get it prepared. And then, you know, I think that we submitted a letter suggesting that there should be probably at least 2 planning commission hearings, maybe back to back, day after. Things like.
Next thing I think is this informational presentation to the planning commission on August 8th, which they have to take public comment.
Yeah, because it's an agendized hearing, so they'll take comments.
Like a status report. Right, but it becomes part of the public record. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're going to collect inputs.
So
they're not going to make a decision. There's no determination, you know, decision making that's going to be made. It's just taking inputs primarily.
So, and just to let everybody know, as we're closing this out, you know, when we're looking at Marble Valley and Lime Rock, it's 2 projects, it's 2 applications. But Lime Rock, when we're looking at it, it's a smaller project. It's almost dependent on Marble Valley being approved and all the facilities included in it. So quite entangled. It's hard, it's difficult. So
look at the circulation plan and where the roadways are and stuff, and you understand why they have to be tied together.
Well, yeah.
Pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, but yeah.
One gets approved and the other one doesn't. Then what
Yeah. Well, obviously, Lime Rock, if Marble, it won't. But
Lime
if
Rock
Marble
get approved, Marble Valley doesn't get approved the way it's proposed. So they have to do a different proposal.
Yeah.
So, so anyways, thank you guys for sticking around for so long. We'll get all this posted on the website tomorrow in the morning.
Sometime.
Well,